This story begins on the very day when the gates from other worlds suddenly open. And this is not a good sign at all. Monsters are constantly flooding into this world, bringing chaos and destruction, and creating widows and orphans. The only ones who can stop them are the people who awaken their magical abilities when the gates open. This group is called the Gold Seekers, and it consists of a few people who are the most worthy and powerful. They have been fighting tirelessly for a long time to ensure a better future for their fellow citizens. Even though they fight hard, casualties still cannot be avoided because there are too many monsters. However, doubts about the sincerity of these people begin to appear almost immediately, as they are not too quick to help others. Because one of them starts acting up and saying that there are many victims. An ordinary person finds himself on the brink of death. However, just when all hope is lost, an unknown figure attacks the giant ogre with incredible fury. After this, a powerful explosion occurs, causing the huge creature to fly to the side and pierce several houses. A handsome young man appears in front of the unfortunate man and asks if everything is okay with him. It turns out to be the captain of the Gold Seekers named Misato, who assures that he will take care of everything and help everyone escape. Another wave of monsters begins to approach, but he takes to the air, calling on his incredible strength. A huge amount of energy flows through his body, and his eyes begin to glow a menacing yellow light. Rushing forward, he destroys all opponents within his reach with incredible speed. His comrades watching him cannot believe that he is facing so many enemies alone. One of the more experienced participants says that with the help of time magic, he is able to see the future and knows their every step. Looking at him from afar, she notes that this young man is no longer human and is surpassing all limits of what is possible. The monsters have been defeated, but the portal remains open, meaning this problem needs to be dealt with urgently. The Gold Seekers move closer, destroying the creatures that emerge from there to prepare for the worst. Misato, as before, is in the vanguard, and asks her comrades if there are any more monsters near the portal. Having received a negative answer, he happily announces that they will now be able to protect the human world. Holding his hand forward, he says that it is time to seal the gate and leave it in the past. However, when victory is already close, something hits him hard in the back, causing him to lose concentration. He jumps to the side, not understanding what is happening and who dares to attack him at such a decisive moment. Looking up, he finds his comrades sealing him in the very dimension from which the monsters emerge. Misato looks at the seal in surprise and tries to understand what is happening. He admits that he had never seen anything like this before, and did not expect betrayal from his friends. He asks if they are all really involved in this and tries to find out why they need it. One of them grins a nasty smile and wonders why Misato is even interested in this. Laughing, they declare that it was precisely because he did not understand the reasons that he was betrayed at the very last moment. Misato looks at them with a puzzled look and realizes that there are no more monsters, so there is no point in betraying them. His comrades accuse him of being a monster who uses time magic, while they simply wanted to make money. They also claim that he dragged them into a dangerous situation in an attempt to help people, but his motives were not sincere. Concluding their villainous monologue, they say that today is the last time they will see him. After this, they laugh theatrically, walk away and wave at him, happy that they are finally rid of him. Misato can't believe this is happening and asks if they are really serious. He remembers that he was always a good person and desperately protected the human world from monsters. All he wants is to save people and nothing more, because that's what real heroes do. The question of why they decided to betray him haunts him, but he quickly realizes that now is not the time to think. At that moment, several creatures appeared before him, their strength not inferior to the strongest creatures with which he had fought before. Misato quickly turns around, striking at the monsters while trying to figure out how to get out of here. However, it soon becomes clear that even more monsters are arriving here that must be fought. Misato uses time magic and the ability to see the future to figure out how to escape the dimension. However, as with betrayal, the ability doesn't show him anything that could help. Smiling, he realizes that in the future he no longer exists, and decides to fight to the end. One of the monsters rushes at him, consumed with rage at the death of its kin. Misato accepts the fight and prepares to spend her last minutes or hours in battle. Even though he stands alone against an entire army, he is still one of the strongest men in the world. After a long time, he becomes exhausted and receives many wounds, preventing him from continuing the fight. Misato bitterly realizes that he cannot change the future, and that he no longer has a choice. The monsters continue to attack, as if the thousands of creatures destroyed have not diminished their numbers at all. Misato, however, realizes that he cannot simply accept death, as it is not in his nature. He decides to concentrate all his strength to continue the fight and perform a small trick. Misato expresses confidence that she can be reborn and become stronger to reach the pinnacle of her power. He hopes that he will be able to take revenge and release all the emotions that have accumulated due to betrayal. Rage fills him so much that all wounds seem insignificant. By creating an energetic aura around himself, he prepares to be reborn and make a leap in time. This spell turns out to be extremely painful, so he screams, but soon everything stops. Suddenly he opens his eyes in the body of a completely different person, in an unknown place that looks like a hospital. He rises carefully to his feet and looks around, feeling that he is relatively safe. After this, he looks in the mirror and realizes that he looks like a completely different person. A confident smile appears on his face, and he realizes that apparently he has managed to be reborn and saved. Looking at the medical equipment, he realizes that there is a lot here that is unfamiliar, and he wonders how many years have passed. He immediately realizes that his plan will fail if he moves forward 100 years, and all his opponents have already grown old and died. However, after a while, his attention is drawn to a small object lying on the nightstand next to him. Looking closer, he notices the student ID card of the owner of this body, and guesses that about 20 years have passed since his previous life. However, there is another important detail in this person's personality. He turns out to be a bearer of the void attribute. Seeing this, Misato starts laughing as if he had won a large sum of money in the lottery. The thing is that in his past life, his comrades feared him because he was the strongest and most famous hero in the world due to time magic. However, once he had trained his skills to a certain level, he realized that he would not be able to develop the true power of the void attribute without special practice. Looking at the documents he found, he tells himself that he feels sorry for the boy whose body he borrowed, destroying his personality. He has no doubt that the void attribute is one of the strongest attributes in the world, but in his past life, no one had such an attribute. This is why the previous carrier has no knowledge of how to develop this ability, and therefore remains at the first level. Misato speculates that the previous owner of this body was often ridiculed for his lack of attributes. Clutching his student ID tightly, he vows before the body's owner that he will do everything possible to make this guy's name known to everyone. Now, thanks to his clairvoyance, he somehow knows how to train the void attribute, which means he will definitely achieve his goals. A spiritual aura begins to appear around him, and he claims that with this power, he will definitely become the strongest. He also angrily promises that he will make his former comrades regret their betrayal. However, in order to take revenge, he first needs to level up and at least minimally get used to the new environment. He falls onto the bed to rest a little and make a clear plan of action that he will follow. The void attribute is associated with magic that controls nothingness, and its essence lies in the ability to freely project the imagination. Imagination is something that almost every person is capable of, but not everyone achieves high results with this skill. The problem is that turning fantasies into reality is quite difficult. It requires a lot of time and skill. Looking at his body, he realizes that it is badly damaged and decides that this will be the starting point for training. He contemplates applying the image from his head to his body to speed up healing. He imagines every cell being restored through magic and imbued with a huge amount of power. As soon as he thinks about this, the body begins to heal and absorb life-giving energy. Misato is glad that his plan is working, and he is recovering quite quickly, despite the severity of his wounds. Of course, he uses a rudimentary spell, so the recovery speed is not too fast. However, if he uses this spell for some time, his powers will definitely increase. This will also increase his ability to realize thoughts and affect the volume of images he can transform. This will eventually lead to the ability to create and use different types of magic at the same time. Thanks to this, he will be able to accurately realize all the images that come to his mind, if he has the necessary desire. A smile appears on his face as he realizes that his place in the world is now within his reach in no time. Suddenly, the door to the room opens and an astonished doctor enters, showing that he is glad to see that the patient has woken up. He immediately reminds them that Misato was seriously injured after the monster attack and advises them to be careful. Misato lies down on the bed and reflects on how it is now clear to him how fate has turned against him. The doctor calls what happened a real miracle, since no one believed that he would be able to recover from his injuries. He also adds that it seems like some forces intervened and helped him, and Misato wonders who these forces are. The doctor looks at him in surprise and asks if he really doesn't know anything about what happened. He enthusiastically says that he is talking about the Great Pentagram of Saints, but Misato claims that she does not know such people. The doctor is not surprised and reminds that Misato has just regained consciousness, so she may well be confused. After this, the doctor informs him that it is time to conduct a thorough examination and asks him to wait a little. Misato suggests that this is most likely another clan of adventurers that has emerged during this time. He understands that he needs to level up to find out how things are in the present time, Turning on the television, he immediately stumbles upon a special news broadcast about a disaster that occurred approximately 20 years ago. Of course, we are talking about the event in which he was once betrayed. And to the hero's incredible surprise, the culprit was somehow found. For some reason, he is identified as the culprit, and this opinion has become stronger in people's minds over the past 20 years. Misato can't believe that the people who betrayed him still haven't told the truth about what happened that day. He tries to understand how it could happen that they tarnished his reputation and lied about what happened. The news reports that Misato foresaw the disaster, but did not tell anyone about it or use the information. The story also mentions that the valiant heroes known as the Pentagram of Saints stopped him. Residents are reminded that since that incident, members of this group have taken leading positions in various fields. Misato feels uneasy to learn that the traitors continue to behave inappropriately even after years. This causes him to burst into nervous laughter, and he tries to suppress it so as not to attract unnecessary attention. He then becomes furious that they not only betrayed him, but also dared to destroy his reputation. He understands that he was shamelessly sacrificed for personal gain and glory. Misato tries to control her anger and declares that she will never forgive what they did. He promises that he will punish each of them for betrayal and lies about his fate. After a while, the fits of rage subside, and he realizes that he must act with caution. He understands that if he starts destroying everything, he will attract unnecessary attention to himself. That is why he decides not to come to the attention of his former comrades unless necessary. Looking at his personal belongings and quickly remembering the password for the phone that belonged to this boy, he realizes that it would be better this way. He decides to dig through the phone's data to find out where it ended up and what to do next. It doesn't take more than a few moments before he stumbles upon a lucky coincidence. The thing is that he studies at an academy, the leader of which is one of his enemies named Iwako Hideki. Misato reflects on the fact that he woke up and immediately knew where one of his enemies was, and considers it a very lucky coincidence. He also understands that Iwako is a very cautious person, and not one to easily show her weaknesses. After thinking for a while, he comes to the conclusion that the difference in levels is still too great, and it is impossible to defeat him yet. However, this does not diminish his determination, but he still decides to first stay in the hospital for a little while longer in order to fully recover. Looking at the ceiling, he tells himself that nothing can be done at the first level, so he needs to level up. Thinking about his opponent, he finds it wise to wait, as Iwako will likely be his first target. Several weeks pass before the hero finally leaves the hospital fully recovered. Before discharge, the doctor notes that the results look amazing and admits that he did not expect such a quick recovery. He suggests that it is due to the Holy Group's blessing, but Misato denies this and explains that it is something else. He is sure that the reason is only his own incredible strength, which nothing can surpass. After this, he thanks the doctor for his concern, and the doctor advises him to take care of himself so as not to get into trouble. Misato, smiling, declares that the preparations are complete, and now it's time to move on to real business. Looking at his card, he comes to the conclusion that his level should be sufficient for the first time. He thinks it wouldn't hurt for him to go into a small dungeon to clear it out and gain experience. He finds out from the doctor that the entire family of the previous owner of this body died in an accident. This is convenient because now no one will look for him or suspect anything if his behavior changes. He regrets that the unfortunate man lived a hard life, but admits that for him it is a profitable situation. The ability to do whatever he wants greatly unties his hands, and he feels confident in his future actions. After a while, he approaches a large portal and carefully studies the article on his phone. He decides to put on a mask and hood to hide his identity and rushes forward. After a while, he approaches the guard and shows him the card, hoping that he will let him through. The guard, looking at the data, suddenly grabs him by the arm and orders him to stop immediately. Misato looks at the guard in surprise and asks what happened, but he doesn't understand such calmness. The guard informs her that Misato is only level 27, and the minimum entry threshold for this place is level 30. He also reminds that level 30 is required to create a group, and going there alone is suicide. Misato pushes the guard's hand away with difficulty to explain why he decided to come here. He shows his student ID and asks me to sign a consent form, claiming that then everything will be fine. Misato had asked the same question while he was in the hospital, as he had already learned a lot about this world. The guard thinks for a moment, trying to figure out what to answer, when suddenly other people call out to him. These people claim that the security guard is simply worried, and imply that he should understand the seriousness of the situation. Misato immediately realizes that the people standing in front of him are bandits and notes that their gazes are quite threatening. Nevertheless, he decides to approach the security guard and ask where he needs to sign. Seeing the right place on the tablet, he immediately takes the stylus and begins to write his initials. Turning around, he abruptly throws the stylus to his interlocutor and makes it clear that there shouldn't be any problems now. He also states that he is grateful for the care, but does not need it at the moment. The guard admits that he has seen such people and asks the escorts to keep an eye on the newcomer. He adds that letting this man go would be suicide and the wrong thing to do. At first the boys resist, but their leader stops them and agrees with the guard. The leader quietly remarks that if no one finds out about what is happening in the dungeon, it will be even better. He also adds that even if something happens, it will not create problems, given the specific nature of the place. Smiling, they immediately jump into the portal, commenting that the newcomer is too arrogant and needs training. The guard apologizes for disturbing them and asks them to keep an eye on the boy. Meanwhile, a gang of bandits makes their way into the dungeon to find out how far the newcomer has progressed. Smiling, their leader declares that they will do what they always do, kill the boy. Thanks to such newcomers, they could calmly commit crimes and blame the monsters. This makes their wallets fatter and they enjoy living such a sinful life. Driven by the thirst for profit, they rush forward, hoping that the newcomer has not yet received fatal injuries. However, after 10 minutes they discover that, despite the direct route, they still have not found it. Suddenly, one of them points to a strange silhouette that has appeared in front of them and peers at it. Taking a closer look, they discover a newcomer who has been in the hospital all this time and has not had time to train. However, the incredible power he inherited from his past life immediately begins to rage within him. Misato only makes a few movements to attack monsters and use various magic techniques. He manages to combine techniques, creating toxic spores with a flick of his fingers. Combining a toxic hurricane and an explosive ball, he unleashes this dangerous cocktail towards the monster. Not a single monster has time to react to such a deadly series of projectiles, and they all die. This spectacle looks truly terrifying, considering that the newcomer had previously shown no promise of strength. The bandit leader claims that this cannot be, since this man has just destroyed so many monsters. Another bandit notes that there is one surprising detail that worries him greatly. Looking at the loot dropped by the monsters, they realize that it is a very rare item that is worth taking. They come to the conclusion that by taking him, they will be able to live comfortably for the next 6 months. They also notice that the newbie hasn't noticed the item yet, meaning they have every chance of capturing it. The bandits rush forward, hoping to kill him and quickly take all the loot he has earned through his labor. They take up positions and prepare to launch a combined attack consisting of several elements. Realizing that everything is ready, they unleash a blast of poisonous magic on him, as well as a bit of freezing rain. However, for a strong hero like Misato, this is just child's play. He knows full well that they will do exactly that. He turns to look at them and asks pathetically if they really thought they were so clever. He easily dodges all attacks and notes that times change, but people remain the same. He expresses contempt for those who try to seize other people's property through vile methods. The bandits are trying to figure out how this is even possible, because this man definitely doesn't have eyes on his back. The bandit leader rushes into the attack, claiming that it is just a coincidence and that he is just lucky. However, Misato decides that it's time to explain to these scoundrels who the strongest person in the universe really is. He turns around and launches a quick attack at his opponent to sap their will to fight back. The blow is so powerful that the bandit leader is seriously wounded and blood spurts from his mouth. The impact throws him back tens of meters, and he crashes hard into solid rock. Misato immediately turns around, showing indifference to the fate of the defeated enemy. He notes that he will destroy such parasites without mercy, since he does not feel the slightest sympathy for them. He adds that he uses them as a stepping stone to his revenge, which begins right now. After some time, a special inspection team arrives at the portal to find out what happened here. Her boss reports that he came after hearing that one of the academy students had entered the dungeon alone. This young man turns out to be Iwako's assistant named Koichi. He is very surprised to see 3 dead bodies. The silent question hangs in the air about who was able to destroy even the weakest fighters so quickly. That evening, Misato returns home and reflects on leveling up and experiencing void magic. He also gains a new spell that allows him to permanently edit information about himself. Now he can not only change his level, but also erase the records of entering the dungeon so that no one can track him. Arriving at the apartment, he realizes that tomorrow is his first day at the academy, and decides to read a few messages. He learns that he is viewed with skepticism, and that many people hate him for being a weakling in the past. However, now everything changes, because in the body of this weak boy lies the most powerful hero. The action moves to the academy where Misato studies, and he decides not to be late. However, as he heads towards the entrance, a girl calls out to him. She turns out to be a classmate of the previous carrier of this body, Asari. She asks if he is feeling better, and he replies that he is almost completely recovered. Asari is happy about this, and Misato realizes that the body's previous host really did have friends. Suddenly, an unpleasant voice declares that it has long been waiting for the return of the scoundrel who barely escaped death. Turning to him, the voice adds that protecting such a first-level weakling is a shame, and one must pay for it. One of the people around asks if he brought what was discussed, to which Misato replies that he is currently short on money. Misato assumes that these are the same scumbags who wrote him threats and extorted money. Asari tries to take his side, explaining that he was just discharged from the hospital and there is no point in offending him. Misato notices that her hands are shaking, and she understands. She realizes how this could all end. A plan of action to help her begins to form in his head. After this, he stands in front of Asari and calmly tells her that she doesn't have to worry. He'll be fine. The bullies sneer, claiming that this is typical behavior for a small boy without an attribute. The leader of the hooligans reminds him that he is a useless nobody who is incapable of using magic. Misato decides to show them what true strength looks like, and tells them that they must remember their place. He thinks that he will definitely defeat them, because he has an extremely powerful attribute. He adds that unlike such scumbags, he always keeps his word. This monologue infuriates the bullies, as they are not used to being treated this way. Trying to understand the meaning of his words, they tell him to be silent and create fireballs. Asari tries to stop them, reminding them that using magic outside the dungeons is prohibited. The bullies order her to be quiet and declare that the talentless loser must pay for the challenge. After this, one of them rushes in and throws a fireball right into Misato's face. However, like a true hero, he calmly looks at the approaching projectile and understands that it will not harm him. He makes a movement with his hand, forming fiery sparks in his fingers that merge into a dense clot. He then throws his fireball to collide the two projectiles with each other. The fire projectile created by Misato significantly outperforms the enemy's attack, so the outcome of the battle is a foregone conclusion. A small explosion occurs, creating a dense smoke screen for a short time. The hooligans can't believe what they see and claim that he uses the same magic as they do. Misato looks at her opponent and mockingly asks what happened to him. At the same time, he wonders if this is really the limit of their capabilities, emphasizing his superiority. The bully understands that he won't be able to cope unless he does something decisive to put the insolent person in his place. He turns to his comrades and orders them to deal with the enemy immediately. After fussing, they decide to combine attacks and fire poisonous and icy projectiles at him. Misato has faced similar enemies before, so this fight goes smoothly and easily for him. He sends the same projectiles in their direction, which neutralize all attacks directed at him. They are amazed, trying to understand how this boy is able to use so many magical attributes. Misato again asks pathetically if this is all they can do. After that, he snaps his fingers and says that now it is his turn to show them his power. As he walks towards them, he adds that they need not fear for their lives, as he does not plan to kill them. Trying to save themselves, they run away, hoping that he won't catch up with them. Misato continues to say that he asked them for help before, but they turned their backs on him. He also adds that he is not interested in their excuses, as he has already met dozens of similar people. With these words, he grabs the leader of the hooligans by the throat and lifts him high above the ground. He notes that such parasites always say the same thing, no matter who they are. With pathos, he declares that he doesn't care what he says in his defense, because he won't stop his fist. Fueled by a thirst for retribution, he charges his next attack, making it as powerful as possible. Moments later, this young man receives his just retribution for the way he treated the previous owner of Misato's body. As a result of the damage he received, he instantly loses consciousness and flies a great distance away. His body leaves behind a trail of energy due to the incredible speed with which he was thrown. When the smoke clears, it becomes clear that he requires urgent medical attention. Misato turns to her friend and says that from this day on, everything will change. He promises the previous owner of this body, whose fate remains unknown, that no one will look down on him again. With a menacing smile, he adds that he intends to move towards his goal of becoming the most powerful adventurer. The hooligans quickly lift up their leader and say that they regret what happened. The leader himself, barely able to stand on his feet, notices that Misato has changed a lot since being discharged. The protagonist rests and justifies his actions by saying that they deserved such a fate. After this, he decides to head to the academy in the company of his new acquaintance. Everyone turns to look at him, noticing that he looks different. But Misato doesn't understand why everyone is looking at him like that. The situation becomes tense, and Misato decides to go somewhere far away. However, as he heads for the door, an unfamiliar voice stops him and says that it wants to talk to him. Misato turns around and hears a question about whether he is the student who entered the dungeon recently. Koichi approaches him with interest and asks if he has a few minutes to talk. Misato looks at him carefully and realizes that the person in front of him is, apparently, a high school student. He suggests that he can simply brush the man off by pretending to be a busy student. Koichi suddenly notices that he hasn't introduced himself yet, and that could have caused a misunderstanding. After this, he states his name and emphasizes that he is the leader of the Biting Cat clan. Asari turns to him in surprise and asks if it's true. She also wonders if this clan was created by director Iwako himself. Koichi waits for a moment, then says that he will answer this question later. He then becomes more threatening and asks Misato to give him some time. The protagonist smiles, turns around and says that if that's the case, he has no other choice. Left alone, Koichi asks if Misato really defeated the adventurers found in the dungeon last night. Misato decides to feign incomprehension and replies that she doesn't know what they're talking about. He is surprised that this information became known despite his abilities. Koichi reports that he was informed that one of the academy students entered the dungeon, and he went there to search. He then reveals that he found criminals there who were known to prey on newcomers. Koichi also notes that Misato used multi-attribute magic this morning. Misato smiles, thinking that this man doesn't even suspect the incredible capabilities of his magic. Koichi becomes serious and asks to explain how he managed to defeat the criminals. Misato starts rummaging through his pockets and says that he was attacked this morning and doesn't remember anything. He also claims that he is only level 1 and was not capable of doing anything like that. With these words, he hands him his card, which clearly states that he is at level 1. Koichi realizes that the Void attribute is a useless ability, and realizes that he wasted his time. This realization causes him great irritation, because he already has a lot of work. Turning around, he opens the door, apologizing for disturbing and for wasting his time asking questions. He also advises to keep a low profile in the future, so that he does not have to do extra work. Misato watches Koichi leave, deep in thought. However, he comes to the conclusion that this man may prove useful. He realizes that Koichi is part of Iwako's inner circle, and does not arouse suspicion, meaning he can be used as a pawn. This gives Misato something to think about, and he realizes that now is the perfect time to try out his magic. After some time, Koichi finishes reporting to the director about the events that happened. Iwako listens to him carefully and notes that this does not look like a failure of the investigation. Turning around, he says that he specifically warned Koichi to be careful in choosing who he works with. Koichi sincerely apologizes to the principal and promises to look into the situation. Iwako states that if it becomes known that he participated in the rookie hunt, his reputation will suffer. After that, he grabs him by the chin and tells him that he needs to understand one important thing. Looking at him with disdain, the director declares that if anything goes wrong, even Koichi will be thrown away like trash. Koichi bows and replies that he understands perfectly well the risk he has taken. However, mentally he is irritated and wonders why he has to deal with such things. He also realizes that if he had known how this would all turn out, he would have invested much more money in the people he hired. Iwako says that with that said, there is one thing he still can't understand. Koichi looks at him in surprise and asks what exactly he is interested in. Iwako says that according to the report, the student in question should be at least in his 3rd year. He also states that there is not a single 3rd-year student here who entered the dungeon last night. Iwako suggests that those guys encountered the monster while hunting newbies, and decided to lie to him about it. He believes this is a more realistic conclusion than thinking that one of the students defeated the hunters on his own. Koichi looks at him in surprise and wonders if this is really the most likely option. Iwako states without a doubt that nothing else comes to his mind. He adds that the only exception might be some extremely unusual scenario. Koichi remembers the student's file he looked at this morning and decides to bring it up. He asks if there might be some unique attribute involved. Iwako thinks for a moment, then says that it is certainly possible, although he finds it hard to believe. Koichi smiles, realizing that he has found the solution to his problem. With a sly smile, he says that this can be left to him, assuring that he will deal with it very quickly. After some time, the action moves to a small dungeon, where another raid on monsters takes place. However, this time the students encounter unexpected difficulties due to the unexpected agility of the monsters. A giant monkey scares away all the students, preparing to pounce on less protected victims. A few moments later, someone, using powerful magic, instantly strikes her in the back. Unable to withstand such damage, the monkey falls to the ground, completely losing its fighting ability, and soon dies. Koichi orders everyone to stay in formation, and not to be afraid of such creatures, as they are easy to kill. The students are surprised by what they see and wonder if they should join his clan. Koichi destroys the remaining monsters and says that this area of the dungeon can now be considered cleared. His comrades note that he has done a great job and praise him for his incredible skills. Without paying them much attention, he says that they will do the rest themselves, and then goes about his business. Stepping back at a respectful distance, he says that the time has come to do exactly what he came here for. With these words, he takes out a strange chain on which eyes are visible and addresses her. He commands this artifact to reveal Misato's location, wherever he may be. Once the order is given, the chain begins to behave unusually and freezes, pointing in a certain direction. Koichi thinks that everything is working out perfectly, and now he can kill this student, making it look like an accident. He notes that he was very surprised when it turned out that Misato is a real hunter. He also recalls that after Misato was discharged from the hospital, he caused a lot of trouble. Moreover, he was interested in the story told by the hooligans who had been beaten by Misato. After listening to their story in all its details, he asked if it was really true. The hooligans swore they were telling the absolute truth when they claimed that the loser had attacked them himself. They added that he used the same magic as they did, but it was much more powerful. As an example, they said that he created a flame the likes of which they had never seen. Koichi listens to this with suspicion, admitting that he finds it hard to believe what he heard. However, he says that he has found out everything he wanted and will now take action against this student. One of the hooligans happily thanks him, believing that now they will be allowed to go home. However, the cruel Koichi orders them to be re-educated, declaring that he has no use for weaklings who lose to incompetence. The hooligans beg for mercy, saying that this is not at all what they agreed upon when they accepted the deal. Koichi doesn't pay attention to their words, when suddenly he hears the thoughts of the leader of the hooligans. The traumatized scoundrel sadly notices that this guy is no longer human and is moving on to a new level. Koichi muses that the fear he sees in the man's eyes seems abnormal. To make sure of this, he sends a specially prepared lesson, which was conducted in the form of a cat. Koichi suggests that this is all just an artifact that creates powerful illusions. He believes that the young man dealt with the novice hunters in some clever way. Walking further, he suddenly stumbles upon another corpse of a monster, killed with particular cruelty. Koichi examines the body closely and wonders if it was the same student who did it. Looking closer, he notices traces of a fire strike and assumes that this guy is not so simple. With a haughty smile, he moves on, saying that this power is still a trifle. Remembering his teacher who left the pentagram of saints, he realizes that even he could have done the same. However, for now he has no choice but to follow orders, but one day he intends to surpass it. Koichi wishes to one day take a place in this squad so that he can rule the world. The thought of world domination makes him smile, as any villain would be delighted with such opportunities. However, he understands that in order to achieve this goal, he must not allow anyone to find out about his connection with the hunters. He is thinking about getting rid of a witness who could cause him problems in the future. Heading towards his goal, he hopes that there is very little left, and he will finally reach it. Koichi wonders what a normal student is doing so deep in the dungeon. Reaching the next corner, he suddenly freezes in surprise, seeing an unusual sight. Misato sits on a huge mountain of defeated monsters, which he defeats without much effort. Smiling, he notices that his opponent is late, because he is already tired of waiting. Koichi hides and anxiously wonders how this is even possible, fearing that he has noticed his presence. Misato somehow manages to read his thoughts and repeats the questions that are going through his head. Koichi understands that even his thoughts are not private to himself, but he still doesn't understand how this is possible. Approaching Misato cautiously, he asks who he is and what he is doing here. Misato says he heard that Iwako chose him, but he turned out to not be that important. He also somehow finds out that Koichi is hunting newcomers and extorting money from them, after which he begins to blackmail him. Koichi asks how he learned this information, realizing that no one could have told him about it. Misato decides not to answer the question, and says that Koichi is a sadist who enjoys torturing others. He emphasizes that he probably never understood what it was like to be the one being hunted. With a menacing grin, Misato says that now she will show him what it is like to be a victim. He adds that with the help of his extremely powerful magic, he will make the opponent dance. Koichi claims that Misato is too dangerous to be left alive. After this, he summons his sword and says that he will enchant it with the power of his incredible ambition. Rushing forward, he declares that for this he must defeat his opponent in order to become even stronger. Misato looks at her opponent mockingly and asks if this is his true strength. With that, he throws a large fireball towards him, hoping that it will be enough to win. Koichi dispels the magic, wondering if he really thinks he can defeat him with such weak skills. However, after a few moments, an electric discharge flies towards him, which must be blocked. Koichi manages to do this at the last moment, but is thrown back several tens of meters. As soon as he stops, spikes of earth begin to emerge from under his feet. He makes quick circular movements to cut them into small pieces in time. Koichi realizes that things are bad, as his opponent is actually capable of using multi-attribute magic. He asks what's wrong with his void magic and why he can control multiple elements at once. Misato materializes behind him and tries to stab him in the back, but Koichi turns around in time. Koichi becomes even more angry and says that Misato does nothing but interfere with his grand plans. After this, they exchange a few blows and jump to the sides. Misato looks at her opponent in surprise and asks what kind of plans they are talking about. Koichi says that he plans to one day surpass Iwako himself and take his place. His eyes fill with a manic lust for power, and he declares that he will definitely become one of the saints. Misato asks why he chose Iwako, reminding him that there are other saints. Koichi smiles, considering the answer obvious, but decides to explain his plan in detail. He says that Iwako is considered an outcast among the other saints because he is too weak and pathetic. According to Koichi's plan, if he becomes a saint, he will be able to conquer the world, and it would be logical to start the extermination from the weakest link. Misato looks away, finding this plan disgusting. Koichi looks at his opponent with confusion, trying to understand why he described him that way. Misato says he was afraid that Koichi would disrupt his own plans and get to Iwako first. After this, he distorts his face into a terrible grimace and says that if Koichi is so pathetic, then he has nothing to fear. These insulting words cause Koichi to lose control of himself, and he rushes forward, demanding silence. He also asks if there is anything wrong with the lust for power or the desire to acquire wealth and women. He claims that he wants to gain the power to silence all dissent and get everything he wants. He claims that this is the kind of power he desires to gain in order to rule the world. Koichi naively believes that if he becomes a saint, he will be able to do whatever he wants. He also says that, having achieved what he wants, he will make one of the female saints his property. Misato says there's no point in listening to these teenage fantasies, since that's not what he's here for. He realizes it's time to end the fight, delivers a quick blow, and easily defeats his opponent. Koichi watches in horror as his sword crumbles into pitiful pieces. Misato approaches him and says that he has been preparing a powerful spell all this time. Koichi feels extreme horror and orders not to approach him. Misato proves relentless and says that she will now make him dance to her tune. Coming closer, he uses the skill of absolute hypnosis to change the consciousness of his victim. Koichi loses his personality completely for a while, and his eyes become empty. As the spell's power increases, he loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Misato notes that for this spell to work, the opponent's spirit must be broken before it can begin to work. After waiting a while, he orders his victim to stand up, and suddenly the victim begins to move his arms. After this, an unknown force lifts Koichi to his feet, although he does not make a single conscious movement. Koichi says in a sepulchral voice that he will now carry out any orders that are given to him. Misato smiles wickedly and reflects that it seems his plan worked. He orders Koichi to focus on completing the mission and states that he will give further instructions later. Koichi says he understands everything, and Misato orders him to act as usual so as not to arouse suspicion. Upon hearing this command, his eyes suddenly become normal and he begins to behave as before. Turning around, he says that he will return to the main group to continue the mission. Misato watches him carefully to make sure the spell works. He smiles again, realizing that everything is going according to his plan. Having dealt with this problem, he decides to go down another corridor, when suddenly a familiar girl appears on his way. Asari asks him where he has been, and then says that she is very worried about him. Misato apologizes for scaring her, then says that she was just hanging out with Koichi for a bit. Asari looks at him in surprise and asks what they can talk about at such a time. Misato says they're discussing how to make dreams come true, and Asari asks if he learned anything useful. Misato says that Koichi gave him great advice, thanks to which one of his dreams will soon come true. Asari smiles and expresses hope that he won't have to wait too long. Koichi calls out to all the students and says that training is ending soon, after which he recommends that they go back. Asari advises the protagonist to follow her, adding that otherwise they will simply be left here. Misato reflects that he is truly glad to be attending this academy, as he has made some important connections. After some time, Iwako decides to talk to Koichi again and asks him how the process is going. Koichi says that, as he expected, students with unique abilities are developing. He shows him one of the students and says that this is the first student who has mastered the aspect of emptiness. He also adds that he conducted an interrogation, and the student admitted to using multi-magic to defeat the hunters. Iwako looks at him in surprise and wonders what kind of multi-magic he could be talking about. Koichi smiles as if this is part of his plan, but decides not to reveal all his cards. He says that he doesn't know all the details right now, but if he's given a little time, he'll come back with information. Koichi asks him with a sly look how he still holds on to his position. Iwako fidgets a little in her chair before saying she feels great in her position. He also states that he hasn't tortured anyone for a long time, and that this student looks like an excellent candidate for torture. Koichi is about to continue the conversation when suddenly the phone starts ringing frantically. Iwako understands that this is a very important call that needs to be made in private. He orders Koichi to leave, saying that he will give all orders later, to which he replies that they will meet later. Iwako picks up the phone and says she's listening carefully. The unidentified woman says she is very happy to hear from her favorite director, and thanks him for choosing their company. Iwako immediately becomes gloomy and advises her interlocutor not to waste time. Afterwards, he addresses her by the name Leia, and his former pentagram comrade asks if he hasn't given in. She says she's surprised he didn't give in, even though they're work partners. Iwako says that she doesn't change, after which he states that he is busy now and asks to reschedule the conversation for another day. Leia asks what the wonderful director, who has already lined his pockets, could be doing. Iwako advises her to watch her language, but she is not impressed at all. She says he is researching a student with the void attribute and is surprised by the pointlessness of this undertaking. Iwako says that this aspect is actually quite unique and valuable in itself. He also says that anything can happen to this man, and Leia, smiling, agrees with him. Leia says that something similar happened to Misato, who once used the aspect of time. Iwako remembers her former comrade and immediately becomes furious. He demands that she stop mentioning his name, but Leia laughs, saying that he has changed a lot since then. After this, she says that she has no complaints against him, since there is nothing to blame him for. She recalls that once he awakened this power, the balance among the other adventurers changed greatly. Smiling, she says that in that case she will contact him later to discuss business. Afterwards, she wishes him luck and hangs up, and Iwako calls her a self-absorbed bitch. He can't believe that the mention of that name still makes him angry after all this time. After this, he says that perhaps it is time to finally let out his emotions. Gathering his strength, he leaves the academy grounds and heads into an unremarkable forest area. There is a locked garage in the area, and Iwako is contemplating how he should torture his victim. Coming closer, he decides to activate the magic lock to open the way for himself. He admits that he is going to release all the anger that he was unable to unleash on Misato. A moment later, the lock opens, and Iwako happily prepares to spend the next few hours. He pushes the doors open and apologizes to his victim for making her wait so long. However, upon closer inspection, he realizes that the garage is empty and the victim has disappeared. Iwako tries to figure out what's going on, finding that no one is there. Suddenly, Koichi appears behind him, swinging his sword and delivering a quick attack. Iwako quickly puts her hand forward to intercept the sword strike with just 2 fingers. He angrily states that he should not be underestimated, despite the fact that he does not look threatening. Koichi is surprised by this development, but Iwako says that he must be getting too cocky. He also asks if Koichi really expects to defeat him that easily. With these words, he summons several energy chains to enslave the enemy. It doesn't take more than a few moments for Koichi to find himself trapped, unable to move. Iwako delivers a powerful kick to the opponent and says that someone like him will not be his equal. Koichi falls to the ground, letting out muffled groans from the pain he just experienced. Iwako comes closer to him and says that he made the worst decision of his life by going against him. He claims that Koichi has destroyed himself with his foolish desires and senseless ambitions. Suddenly he hears a voice that says that Iwako remains the same idiot he has been all his life. Iwako turns around in fear, wondering who dared to address him with such impudence. Misato says that Iwako continues to bow down to the strong and take out her hatred on the weak. He adds that apparently, Iwako has not changed at all, and remains the same pathetic and stupid impudent person. Iwako asks him how dare he speak like that, adding that he is the director of the academy and cannot be spoken to like that. Misato notes that the words he just said to Koichi sound like a perfect introduction to himself. Iwako asks who he is, but Misato replies that she doesn't like to rush into such important matters. Looking at him sternly, he says that having finally reached him, they should have a quiet chat. Taking a few more steps towards him, Misato calls his opponent by name, demonstrating that he knows him very well. Iwako calls upon her strength and declares that she will not allow herself to be made into a pathetic fool. His anger begins to take on a magical form, and the ground beneath his feet rises rapidly. Iwako promises to show him how big the difference in their strength is, so that he will finally cool his ardor. He summons a giant stone hand and says that now the enemy will taste the earth magic that he has been honing for a long time. He also states that no student, no matter how strong, will be able to escape this blow. With a quick and distinctive movement, he orders Misato to go to the afterlife immediately and not interfere with him anymore. At the same moment, a giant fist begins to fly towards Misato, who, despite this, remains motionless. There is a powerful explosion, and for a while Misato's fate remains a mystery to the impudent Iwako. He starts laughing and celebrating prematurely, explaining that this is what usually happens when students get caught. Looking more closely, he realizes that the attack has destroyed the place that served as his shelter. Iwako realizes that he has gone too far, and adds that now he will have to find a new place to vent his anger. As he heads in that direction, he says he has no idea who it was. but the enemy will have to stay put. Taking out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his face, he notes that such students cause a lot of trouble. However, after a few moments he stops in horror, realizing that his goal has not been achieved. As the smoke clears, it becomes clear to the silhouette standing in the same place that his attack did no damage. Iwako even freezes for a moment and tries to understand how this is even possible. Misato continues to act arrogantly and says that he didn't expect such a harsh reaction. Putting his hands in his pockets, he says that he just suggested chatting to figure things out. Iwako tries to understand how this student was able to survive despite being hit by a giant earthen fist. He asks him who he is and orders him to immediately state his name so that everything becomes clear. Misato decides to take a little time and asks if he really doesn't know him. Immediately after this, he tries to portray a facial expression similar to the one he had in his past life. But he does a poor job. Iwako looks at him in bewilderment, noting that he has never met such an idiot, and orders him to state his name immediately. Misato says that with such words he hurt his very tender feelings. After that, he asks if Iwako really forgot about him when he changed his aura. Iwako senses the presence of her sworn enemy and declares that this simply cannot be true. He takes a few steps back, but his balance begins to gradually wobble. Clutching his head, he says that this guy definitely can't be Misato, since he was presumed dead 20 years ago. This seems incredible to him, and after a while his consciousness becomes clouded, and a brilliant idea comes to mind. He turns to the main character and orders him to stop putting on this stupid circus. He also asks him if he hadn't read the latest news that was shown on TV. He grits his teeth and says that he can't stand hearing about a scoundrel named Misato. He waves his hand, calling upon new powers of the magical attribute, and declares that this guy is no longer of this world. Loudly shouting about Misato's death, he creates a small tornado around himself and prepares to direct it towards the enemy. Misato lets out an exasperated breath, realizing that at this rate he won't be able to make even the slightest progress. Turning towards his opponent, he says that he always believed only in what was in his favor. Iwako orders him to stop talking nonsense immediately and come closer so he can be killed. Misato smiles and notes that such behavior indicates that he is still tormented by the remnants of his conscience. He says that his amazing words come from those around him, and that is why he decided on this dishonest act. Misato officially accuses him of betraying him and throwing him to be eaten by a giant monster. Iwako completely loses control of herself and throws a giant magic projectile, ordering her to shut up immediately. Misato realizes the moment of truth has arrived and rushes forward to break the spell. He makes a quick wave of his hand, and it has a noticeable effect almost immediately. Iwako watches in horror as his magic fades and realizes that something is definitely wrong. The thing is that this magic turns out to be terrifyingly familiar to him and leads to very sad thoughts. He remembers his past self and realizes that this is the kind of magic Misato used. A moment later, his thoughts are interrupted by a bright and loud explosion that occurs a few meters away from him. Unable to believe what is happening, he falls to his knees with a dull thud. He says that he was definitely locked in the dungeon, which means he couldn't return from there. Misato approaches him and informs him that he has indeed been locked away and thrown into the depths of despair. Iwako doesn't dare look up at him and wonders if it really is Misato in front of him. Misato sits down a little and says that it has been a very long time since they last met. Smiling, he notes that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and that he's glad that they remembered him even after so many years. Iwako feels despair permeating his entire body and decides to resist this feeling to the last. After this, he quickly rises to his feet and tries to encourage himself with growing rage. He orders them not to take him for a fool, and states that admitting that Misato died and returned to this world means that there is no simple way to interpret their situation. He raises his hand to materialize another energy clot. Saying that ghosts are supposed to be quiet, he launches several projectiles towards Misato. Misato pointedly puts her hands in her pockets and jumps to the side, easily dodging the attack. However, this is not the only ace up Iwako's sleeve to maintain her position. Misato continues to dodge attacks of varying levels without experiencing any problems or difficulties. Iwako calls him a cheeky puppy who thinks too highly of himself, relying on his agility. He reflects on the fact that he needs to seize the advantage, no matter the cost. He understands that during the gold-digging era, he was not a strong fighter, and even now people laugh at him. However, this does not mean that he is weak and has no opportunity to prove his strength. Using special gem rings on his hand, he summons multiple elements at once. After this, he decides to demonstrate the secret technique that he spent 20 years creating. Using his dual wind and earth magic skill, he aims carefully and unleashes his full power. A huge number of projectiles made of solid rock, accelerated by the wind, rush towards the enemy. When hit, a powerful explosion occurs, hiding the victim from Iwako's sight. Feeling tired, he wonders how his opponent liked it. adding that it was his strongest magic. Once the smoke clears, he discovers that there is no longer any trace of Misato's existence. He understands that no one is fighting back, which means he has managed to break the will and life of the enemy. After this, a nasty smile appears on his face and he starts laughing. Looking ahead, he tells himself that he is finally putting his plan into action. Iwako is proud of herself and notes that she finally defeats that damned freak Misato. Looking at his hand, he admits that he is wrong to assume that he has changed over the years. He also claims that over 20 years, he has gained experience and strength. Iwako insists that the man everyone knew 20 years ago is long gone. With arrogance and haughtiness, he says that he should not have crossed his path, even if he had returned here. He continues to reassure himself, thinking that over the past 20 years, his level has increased, and he has become noticeably stronger. Having finished this session of self-adoration, he exhales, realizing that it is time to have a snack and go home. He rejoices, believing that he has finally defeated Misato and will no longer allow others to look down on him. Pride takes over again, and he declares that he has always been the strongest among the Holy Pentagram. Misato decides whether Iwako is finished, or whether he will have to wait a little longer while he admires himself. Iwako looks at the protagonist, who is not taking any damage, and asks herself why this is happening. Misato notes that Iwako is indeed becoming capable of powerful magic, as befits a hero of the current era. He also adds that he can now release all his power without holding back. Iwako realizes that she is facing a real monster that nothing can destroy. However, he understands that he cannot retreat now, because he has worked too long to gain power. Rushing forward, he declares that he will not allow anyone to interfere with his grand plans again. With that, he creates a giant stone hand to grab Misato and crush her. After a few moments, he clenches his fist, hoping to kill his opponent in one move. He's happy that he hits, believing that even if Misato survives, he can be finished off with a couple of spells. Misato notes with disappointment that he expected much more from a mage of his caliber after so many years. After this, he uses water magic and frees himself from captivity, noticing that Iwako is still only barking loudly. The water quickly turns the stone fist into a pitiful semblance of clay, which crumbles before our eyes. Misato questions whether Iwako really thought that would be enough to defeat him. Iwako feels that the situation is getting more and more difficult, and understands that she needs to give it her all. However, fear takes over, and he tries to throw off the wind slashes, ordering them not to come near him. Misato makes a sharp, confident movement with her hand to neutralize these currents. It creates a powerful hurricane that absorbs all wind cuts and neutralizes their effect. Iwako is unprepared for such a barrage of magical energy that disperses everything in its path. With each passing second, it becomes more and more difficult to stay on his feet until he finally loses his balance. Unable to bear it, he crashes into a tree with force, and another projectile is already flying towards him. Misato runs closer to him, clenching her fist, which bursts into flames. Iwako, realizing that the time for resistance has passed, falls to his knees and begs for forgiveness, saying that he is very sorry. He admits his guilt and states that he accepts responsibility for his actions. Misato listens to him, but not a single muscle on his face moves, despite all his requests. Iwako muses that Misato has always been a naive and kind person, and therefore hopes to deceive him again. However, to his surprise, Misato orders him to shut up, noting that he had already fallen for similar words last time. Afterwards, Misato wonders if he'll let himself fall for it again. Iwako asks him to wait with the decision, reminding him that they were good friends in the past. Misato, rushing towards Iwako, he delivers a powerful blow charged with fire energy fueled by hatred. This blow is followed by a flurry of attacks, which Misato unleashes without hesitation. Iwako feels like he's starting to bleed internally from his wounds, but he's still alive. Looking at the blurry silhouette of the enemy, he understands that he should not have messed with him. Misato delivers the final blow that should put an end to their confrontation. Misato approaches the defeated enemy and tells him that he should thank him for sparing him. However, unfortunately, Iwako is unconscious and does not hear these high-flown speeches about mercy. Misato sadly realizes that he can't hear him and decides to resort to a more cunning method. After some time, Iwako comes to her senses and carefully looks around. Misato gets his attention, noticing that he has finally woken up. Iwako, frightened, jumps back several tens of meters. He begins to beg for mercy, claiming that he does not want to die under any circumstances. Misato shakes her head and says that she won't kill him if that's the only thing he's afraid of. After this, he comes closer and adds that, of course, a price must be paid for such a service. Bowing before him, he asks if Iwako agrees to answer all his questions. Iwako nods immediately, and Misato starts rummaging through her pockets to get something important. After that, he shows him a photo of Leia on his phone and says that he needs information about her. Iwako tries to take the phone, but Misato immediately pulls her hand away, not allowing her to do so. Looking closely, he notices that, judging by the call history, Leia contacted him today. Becoming serious, he asks what they were talking about. Iwako replies that Leia is coming to Japan in 3 days, and they had a business conversation. Misato smiles, realizing that everything is working out perfectly, and realizes that she won't have to look for a new target. Dark fantasies begin to appear in his head, and he decides that he will definitely take revenge on this woman. After this, he loudly declares to himself that he is already deciding what he will do next. He then throws the phone to Iwako, saying that he is returning her favorite toy, but demands that she act as usual. He also reminds that not a word should be said about his real identity. He also reveals that he casts a spell on Iwako's heart while he is unconscious. Misato threatens that if Iwako reveals who he is, his heart will instantly stop beating. He squeezes his hand, creating a small explosion to demonstrate how quick his death can be. Iwako is both impressed and frightened by these prospects, and realizes that it is better for him to keep his mouth shut. Misato says that Iwako must be careful and not let him down under any circumstances. In fact, this is all a complete deception. Misato does not use any magic and is simply bluffing. The thing is that Iwako's character is too cowardly, and even in this way he can be easily intimidated. Misato muses that she won't use hypnosis on him, although there is a special purpose behind it. With a sadistic smile, he thinks that all this is being done so that Iwako will despair, maintaining his composure. The action shifts to a plane preparing to land in Japan 3 days after the events described. Leia sits calmly in her business class seat, absent-mindedly looking out the window. Her assistant says they are almost there, and starts packing her things. Meanwhile, the flight attendant addresses the passengers and informs them that the plane will soon arrive at its destination. However, a moment later, a loud scream from a frightened woman is heard, and Leia assumes that something is wrong. The plane is hijacked by bandits who demand that everyone get down on the floor and take out their valuables. They point firearms at passengers, forcing them to immediately comply. Leia behaves calmly, which greatly surprises her assistant. The bandits warn that if no one follows their orders, everything will end bloodily. Leia decides not to waste time and rushes forward to neutralize the criminals. With one blow, she grabs the arm of one of them, disarms him and throws him over herself. The criminal doesn't have time to understand anything while Leia deals with several attackers at once in an instant. The terrified passengers watch what is happening and realize that their fate is much happier than they thought. They look at Leia with joy and say that they are saved because the saint is fighting for them. After some time, the plane lands successfully at the airport, and the criminals are handed over to police custody. The local administrator bows to Leia and says he cannot express how grateful he is to her. Leia smiles and replies that she is glad to be on this flight and save people. Looking at the weapons, she notices that the criminals were armed with something untraceable. She adds that recently there has been an increase in the number of groups using equipment made from materials obtained in dungeons. From this, she concludes that it is necessary to equip her personnel with self-defense equipment. Approaching the manager, she says that she would like to get the same kind of weapon that the employees use. The manager bows before her and promises that he will provide her with equipment as a token of gratitude for her help. After that, she heads to the airport to take care of the important things she still has to do. After calling her people, she reports that everything went perfectly and the captors can be released. Her assistant asks how smoothly the deal went, and Leia replies that it was even more interesting than she expected. She notes with pleasure that the fake hijackers helped seal the deal. She then notices the crowd greeting her with honors, and says that this also had a good effect on her reputation. The rapt crowd says they expected nothing less from a heroine who saves the lives of ordinary people. Leia smiles and waves at them, knowing that she has achieved all the desired results in the near future. However, this is far from all that Leia is guilty of, and now it becomes clear what she is hiding in her closet. Getting out of the car, she says that it is time to get down to business for which she flew to Japan. After some time, she finds herself at Iwako Academy to visit her old friend. Iwako hears a loud knock and realizes that Leia has come to him, which means he will have to act according to Misato's plan. Leia immediately smiles from ear to ear and says that she apologizes for invading his personal space. Sitting down over a cup of tea, she mentions that he reminds her of the investigation of the student with the void attribute. She asks if there has been any progress on this matter, but Iwako states that it is a false alarm. Leia notes that even if the attributes are unique, ultimately it still doesn't mean anything. At this time, Iwako understands that if he turns out to be superfluous for her, then a spell will instantly work that will kill him. Leia states that in that case she wants to talk about the real reason for her arrival. She reminds him that she wanted to discuss the new drug they are developing. Looking around, she notices that he is making good use of this academy's system. Misato is at some distance. but can listen to everything that is happening thanks to a special device. His impeccable moral compass does not allow him to stand aside, and he considers such behavior to be extremely low. He also makes a dire promise that the next one to know true despair will be Leia. After some time, he decides to watch the news, which talks about Leia's arrival in Japan. The announcer says she is being praised everywhere for dealing with the hijackers who took over the plane. Misato reflects that this woman was one of those who betrayed him 20 years ago. He wonders how it became known that she is now producing unique weapons from materials from the dungeons and has become rich from it. However, judging by a recent conversation he managed to overhear, he learns that she is using the school for dark deeds. He begins to slowly gather himself to move forward and take revenge on his sworn enemy. He understands that he cannot leave unpunished a hypocrite who behaves like a hero in public, but in reality turns out to be a villain. Once at school, he wonders how best to approach Leia, given the circumstances. Analyzing her surroundings, he realizes that security here was already strict, but now it has become even stronger. First, he decides to sort out the situation, but Asari suddenly calls out to him. He turns around and greets her, and she wishes him good morning and continues to smile sincerely. Coming closer, she looks at the article open on his phone and asks why he needs it. Without waiting for an answer, she says that Leia is her idol, since yesterday she dealt with all the bandits on her own. She also adds that her Great Snake Clan is very popular, and Misato is interested in them. Asari explains in detail that this is a clan founded by Leia, and it contains a huge number of strong fighters. Misato realizes that the people in black suits who accompany Leia everywhere are her guards. Asari says that many students here are planning to join the army, and asks what he himself plans to do. Misato initially replies that he is not interested, but then freezes, realizing that this could be his chance. He realizes that if he can use this clan, he might be able to get closer to Leia. This information gives him some interesting thoughts, and he thanks Asari for the conversation. He states that thanks to this conversation, he finally understands what he needs to do, and then quickly leaves. Asari can't understand why he suddenly thanked her, but decides not to pay attention to it. Meanwhile, the action moves to the director's office, where a tense atmosphere reigns. Iwako doesn't know what to do when she suddenly starts from a sharp phone ringing. The director picks up the phone and asks who decided to call him. Misato greets the interlocutor and informs him that he needs a favor. Iwako asks what exactly is needed, and Misato lays out her plan to carry out if Leia contacts him. At this time, the action moves to a secret laboratory, where scientists are carefully studying a captured employee. He is clearly unwell, but this does not bother scientists at all, since they are documenting all his symptoms. After a while, the doors open and the silhouette of the familiar Leia appears. She looks at the subject with interest and asks how he feels. The subject begs for mercy, saying that if they continue to inject him with this drug, he will die. However, his requests are not destined to come true, as Leia suddenly deals him a powerful blow to the head. After this, she arrogantly declares that she does not listen to the opinions of lab rats, no matter what they say. Smiling, she adds that he shouldn't be so pessimistic about things. Pressing harder on him, she notes that if his body is compatible with this medicine, he will become much stronger. After this, she gives the scientists the command to continue the therapy, despite all the patient's objections. The scientists immediately grab syringes containing the terrifying substance and head towards the unfortunate test subject. He tries to resist, claiming that he refuses such treatment, but they administer the drug anyway. Immediately after this, the young man falls to the ground and begins to convulse. It becomes clear that his body is rejecting the drug, but the process is extremely difficult. He is still alive, but his consciousness and mental capacity are questionable. From the outside, it seems that he has lost his mind and now only mutters incoherent words. Leia notes with regret that this time they only achieved the loss of speech abilities, and they cannot do without magic. As she opens the door, she says they still need more data to get the formula they need. Her assistant notes that new test subjects will soon be needed to continue the experiments. Leia reports that they will outwardly present this as a recruitment of new recruits into the Great Serpent Clan, and organize new arrivals. After entering the elevator, she contacts Iwako and says that she wants to discuss with him the test subjects they talked about earlier. She states that she needs those who have paper magic skills to conduct experiments on them. She asks if he can recommend some students from the academy to her. Iwako realizes it's time to act and says he has several suitable candidates. He also recommends conducting a selection process within the academy to find the most skilled. Leia smiles and notes that sometimes even he is capable of coming up with good ideas instead of some nonsense. Having reached the desired floor, she says that further details will be communicated later. Iwako, meanwhile, hangs up, realizing that he has just had one of the most difficult conversations of his life. Looking at the ceiling, he reflects that he did everything exactly as Misato asked, After some time, Leia's assistant comes to the academy and says that he wants to make an important announcement. He states that the Great Serpent has decided to hold selection exams in order to find worthy recruits. The students look at each other in surprise, wondering if they are really going to get a chance to go there. Misato, who is present at the meeting, realizes that Iwako did not let him down and fulfilled all the demands. With a smile, he realizes that the path to getting closer to Leia is now open, and all that remains is to wait for the right moment. At the stadium, clan representatives thank the students for submitting their applications to participate in the Great Serpent selection exams. They also explain exactly how the selection process will take place, so that all participants understand everything correctly. Misato realizes that in order to get closer to his next victim, he must join this clan at any cost. Previously, when approaching Iwako, he tried not to attract attention, but now he realizes that he needs to act differently. He decides that it is necessary to attract the attention of Leia's right-hand woman and the other examiners who will be monitoring the process. He decides to demonstrate his unstoppable and incredible strength in order to secure his place among the selected ones. There's a short break before the exam, and during that time, Asari suddenly approaches him. She asks if he is really also being selected, and Misato replies that he has become interested in participating. He knows he doesn't want her to get involved in this, but he can't talk her out of it. Asari, a little embarrassed, says that she knows perfectly well that she is a loser and does not belong here. After this, she adds that she has her own reasons for wanting to join this clan. She wishes him luck and says that they should try to get there together. Misato understands that she must pass this selection no matter what, and intends to do so. After some time, a test begins, measuring the magical power of anyone who touches the sensor. The examiners say that this is the initial stage of selection, which can be used to identify the most worthy candidates. Different students place their fingers on the device, causing vibrations depending on the strength of their fingers. Staff closely monitor each student and record all indicators. After a while, it's Misato's turn, and as soon as his name is called, he steps forward. Along the way, he shows his ID and smiles as the examiner evaluates his level and skills. Seeing that he has the attribute of emptiness, the examiner lowers his expectations, deciding that there is no point in expecting a breakthrough. Misato is preparing to surprise everyone with his abilities, because no one believes in him, and this gives him strength. When it touches a special sensor, it creates a powerful flash, the likes of which the device has never recorded before. The examiner closes his eyes to avoid being blinded by the brightness of the flash. Asari and the students standing nearby are confused and wonder what is happening and why the light is so bright. Misato carefully removes her hand from the sensor as the others recover from being blinded. After this, he asks the examiner whether he kept his hand on the device for enough time, and receives the answer that everything is fine. The examiner immediately begins filling out the results, realizing that he has an extremely interesting and rare case in front of him. In terms of magical ability potential, he gives Misato the highest possible rating. Next, Misato goes to a test that checks the ability to create various magical elements. At first, he creates only a lump of earth, and the examiner watches this with slight disappointment. However, Misato decides to smile to intrigue those present. Immediately after this, he extends his hand to the side, creating another element. The creation of two elements simultaneously demonstrates serious magical potential, and the examiner's mouth drops in surprise. However, this is not enough for Misato, so he decides to add fire elements. In just a few seconds, he creates all the basic elements from which magic is combined. People watching him cannot believe that one person is capable of creating all the basic attributes at once. Misato wonders in her mind how the void attribute, which everyone laughs at, can allow such things to happen. Asari happily runs up to him and says that it was amazing, and she is very proud of him. Misato thanks her for the praise and encourages her to try her best. Asari approaches a small bed of plants to interact with them. She thrusts her hand forward, creating a weak flash that shoots towards the plants. Asari, as you might guess, has a strong inclination towards healing magic. Under the influence of her magic, flowers instantly come to life and are filled with life-giving force. Everyone watches as Asari, with one movement of her hand, brings flowers to life that would have died without her help. However, most people find this skill useless and are not impressed. Misato realizes that this is light magic, which is a rare and valuable attribute. However, the examiners are unlikely to be able to appreciate her because they do not realize how special Asari is. Leia's right hand watches the process closely and notes that such abilities are very interesting. He notes that the girl should be considered as a test subject, as her healing skills will allow her to withstand the tests longer. After some time, the organizers announce that it is time for singles matches. They point to one of their fighters and say that these people will become opponents of ordinary students. Frightened participants wonder how they will be able to fight against professionally trained fighters. Leia's assistant clarifies that it will not be victory that will be judged, but rather how the participants perform in battle, since it is impossible to defeat these opponents. One of the fighters looks closely at Misato and asks if he is the student who caused a commotion at the school. He notes that Misato appears to be performing well in other tests, but that it doesn't matter in actual combat. Misato smiles and says that she hopes to learn a lot from her seniors. His opponent becomes arrogant and declares that he is going to finish him off. After these words, the enemy waves his arms and creates a giant boulder to throw at Misato. Almost immediately, he decides to crush this boulder into several smaller projectiles so that they move faster. Misato creates a small vortex of air to intercept all projectiles flying towards him. Immediately after this, he sends them back, thereby demonstrating his fighting abilities. His opponent quickly covers himself with his hands to prevent any stones from damaging his face. He wonders how this is even possible, since his magic was just destroyed in one blow. However, when he comes to, it turns out that Misato has already disappeared. The stunned mercenary cannot believe that the enemy has disappeared and tries to figure out where he went. Misato materializes behind her opponent and prepares to hold an icicle to his throat. He chuckles and says he expected to see more, but admits it was still a valuable experience. The judge overseeing the exam announces that Misato is the winner. Leia's right-hand man watches this in amazement and can't believe that this boy defeated an employee of the Great Serpent Clan. This makes him wonder who this student is and what powers he has. That evening, he contacts his boss and informs her that the exam is over. Leia asks him with a bored look if he found anyone interesting, and receives the answer that he found an interesting specimen. Leia asks what exactly he means, and he explains that one student performed significantly better than the others. She notes that this student appears to have a rare attribute of emptiness, which was previously considered useless. Leia wonders if this student is the same student that Iwako is following. Rising from her chair, she laughs quietly and says that the situation is getting more and more interesting. She adds slyly that, apparently, she has managed to acquire a very curious ward. The next day, the clan leader announces that the names of those who passed the selection exams will be announced today. As expected, Misato takes first place thanks to her outstanding abilities and willpower. The students standing behind him say it's not surprising, as the exam was a piece of cake for him. Misato smiles and thinks that everything is going exactly according to plan, and now he will be able to get closer to his goal. Meanwhile, the judge announces that the next student to pass the selection is Asari. The naive girl is happy that she was able to take a high place, and Misato is very surprised by this. He reflects that he didn't realize that the unique attribute alone would be enough to pass. He also suggests that Leia is using the Academy's students for her own dark purposes. There can be no other explanation, because there must be a reason why Asari is selected. Asari meets the protagonist's gaze and smiles sincerely, rejoicing at her victory. Misato realizes that, despite the difficulty it poses for him, he will have to act to save her. He reflects on how he is doing everything he can to ensure that no one dares to harm her. With a stern look, he decides that he must achieve his goal by protecting the innocent girl. A few days after the exam, they arrive at the Japanese branch of Lei's company. They are met by her assistant, who says that he is glad to see everyone who passed the selection, and invites them to make themselves at home. He also reports that a compatibility check will be conducted today before officially joining the clan. He emphasizes that this event is very important, since Leia herself will be present at it. The assistant adds that Leia will join them after the check, but for now, he decides to give them a tour. Misato follows him, wondering what he should do next. He understands that ideally he should head straight to Leia, but now he can't leave Asari alone. Asari happily says that being in such a huge building actually makes her nervous. She also says that the opportunity to join this clan makes her happy. Misato looks at her in surprise and asks why she even decided to join the Great Serpent Clan. Asari explains that her mother is in the hospital and the treatment is expensive, so she needs money. Misato understands that Asari is acting nobly and is sympathetic to her choice. He also comes to the conclusion that he is now obliged to protect her even more, if only so that she can help her mother. After a while, the assistant leads them to the basement and says that they are almost there, inviting them to go down. A few minutes later, they find themselves in a strange room where there are many guards. Looking around, Misato assumes that this is a testing facility, and is finally convinced of Leia's dark intentions. After taking a few steps, the assistant orders his colleagues to close the doors. A moment later, the metal doors slam shut behind the naive schoolchildren. Misato assumes that they are not going to be released and understands that the situation is serious, but remains calm. The confused students approach Leia's assistant and ask what all this means. He becomes stern and orders them to shut up immediately, making it clear that the jokes are over. The students don't understand why he suddenly started to treat them with hostility, and decide to find out everything. The assistant reminds that, as he said earlier, they will now conduct a compatibility check. He decides to clarify the details, explaining that compatibility will be demonstrated through interaction with the new drug. He explains that this drug is made from ingredients obtained in the dungeons and is capable of enhancing abilities. The students are delighted with this information, thinking it is a great idea. Misato decides to intervene and asks if the drug has any side effects. His opponent smiles and says that it will be much easier to show everyone what will happen if compatibility does not occur. At the same moment, the CCTV footage is turned on, showing the person being injected with the drug dying. All the school children watch in horror as the unfortunate man, under the influence of the drug, turns into a lifeless body. They wonder what that was, to which the villain replies that they just saw what happens if they prove incompatible. Students predictably refuse to participate in the program, saying they would never agree to it. They understand that they will have to break through by fighting, and are preparing to engage in combat with their opponents. Attacking Leia's right hand, they demand that she immediately release them and return them home. Misato decides to ignore her classmates and not protect them, focusing only on Asari. He tells her to stay with him while the villains deal with the other students. He immediately rushes into the attack and delivers several powerful blows, causing his opponents to lose consciousness. Due to the damage they receive, they become immobilized and hang in the air. After this, the mercenary irritably says that the number of test subjects has decreased. With these words, he looks around again in search of other victims, and tries to figure out who to start with. Asari catches his attention because she appears to be the weakest of the remaining test subjects. He states that he is interested in seeing the result of the experiment if it were carried out on a student with the attribute of light. After this, he begins to approach her, holding a syringe in his hands, which can easily miss the vein. Misato steps forward to protect the girl, gesturing that she will not let anyone pass. His opponent asks in surprise what he is doing, to which Misato replies that she will not allow scum to harm the innocent. These words hurt the villain's pride, and he decides to teach the impudent student a lesson. After this, he turns to his subordinates and orders them to immediately capture and neutralize him. They rush to attack, but are unable to reach Misato because he is too fast. Misato effortlessly knocks out a giant bruiser who could twist a normal man into a ram's horn. The remaining guards watch the results of the fight in surprise and try to figure out who they are up against. Misato continues to move at incredible speed and defeats all of her opponents. None of them can do anything against him because he is too fast and strong. Only a few seconds pass, and he already deals with several guards, after which only the main villain remains. The criminal can't believe that his men were killed with one blow. Misato turns around and says with a menacing expression that he will be next. Such determination even briefly frightens an experienced mercenary who has seen a lot. He comes to the conclusion that he must act faster and more decisively. He lunges towards Asari to grab her and drag her away before she can react. Misato abruptly stops his rush and says that he warned him that he won't let anyone near Asari. The mercenary jumps to the side and is amazed at the speed of an ordinary student. He wonders who this guy is, because a normal person shouldn't be capable of something like this. Misato looks at her opponent again with a menacing expression and says that he must prepare for battle. Now the mercenary begins to be overcome with real fear for his life. He curses several times, trying to figure out how to act in this situation. Misato turns to Asari and tells her that she should stay behind to avoid getting hurt. Asari watches what is happening with fear and thinks that her comrade is incredibly brave and strong. She realizes that she couldn't even follow his movements when he was fighting the mercenaries. She assumed he had become stronger, but she didn't expect him to be so indestructible. The mercenary advises the enemy not to become arrogant, as this could lead to defeat. Misato says she wants to ask him one question before they fight. He looks at the crippled students and says that the academy's students are being used as test subjects. Looking closely at his opponent, he asks why they need this. The mercenary smirks and asks if Misato didn't listen to his explanation about the drug. He then states that all who choose to follow Lady Leia receive her blessing. He says that once she creates the perfect formula for the medicine, she will gain even greater power. Misato asks if it is really acceptable to conduct inhumane experiments on people for this reason. The mercenary replies that they use everything that is available, and that is the only thing that matters. Smiling, he says he doesn't see anything wrong with it, because that's how people find meaning. He sincerely claims that he considers it an honor for such people to be experimental subjects. Misato recalls Asari's words about her mother being seriously ill and the cost of treatment being expensive. The thought that such a kind girl could fall into the hands of these scoundrels makes him furious. The aura around him changes dramatically and he clenches his fists. The mercenary continues his story, saying that Asari should also be happy, because now she is their test subject. Misato orders him to be quiet as his aura flares brighter than flames. The mercenary can't believe that his words have driven his enemy into a rage and tries to understand what happened. Misato asks if he understands who is in front of him, and accuses him of not being able to understand Asari's feelings. Asari is amazed by his incredible sensitivity. The mercenary is surprised by such words because he never knew Asari, but now he feels a lot of pressure. Nevertheless, he decides to challenge Misato to find out how strong he is. He adds that he usually forbids such students from interfering, but admits that he admires his courage. He immediately invites Misato to join Leia, saying that she will be in great need of such promising recruits. He proposes a deal whereby Misato must hand over Asari to them in exchange for a high-ranking position within the corporation. Misato orders him to be quiet, loudly declaring that she can never forgive people like them. The mercenary understands that now everything will be decided by fists, and declares that Misato will regret her decision. After this, he decides to charge his body with a large amount of energy in order to engage in combat with the enemy. Even his eyes begin to shine with overwhelming power, which clearly shows that the battle will be serious. Misato looks closely at the enemy and asks if he has enhanced body magic. The mercenary decides to talk about his fighting abilities and says that combined with martial arts, he is invincible. Looking at the enemy, he advises him to attack, while taking a defensive position. Immediately after this, he deceives his opponent and rushes into battle himself, hoping to confuse him. Misato easily dodges the attack, as she is too fast to be caught by such a move. However, the shockwave created by the collision is directed straight towards Asari. Watching this, she is amazed by the incredible power of both fighters. The mercenary says with a smile that apparently Misato managed to dodge after all. Misato analyzes the enemy and realizes that body enhancement magic is indeed powerful, and decides to take advantage of this knowledge. The mercenary rushes forward and says that now Misato will not be able to avoid the next blow. Misato decides to focus on turning the experience into an image that will help him win. The mercenary, seeing the enemies in action, wonders if he is giving up. As he approaches, he delivers a swift blow that stops just centimeters from Misato's head. Misato's eyes snap open, activating her void magic at full power. At the same second, he strengthens his body and intercepts the blow at the last moment. The mercenary is shocked by the result of his attack and says that this simply cannot be. He doesn't believe that Misato has the same power as Iona, although in his hands it seems even more powerful. Smiling, Misato says that she can now use body enhancement magic too. He thanks his opponent, saying that it was thanks to him that he was able to imagine this magic and appropriate it for himself. Immediately after this, he delivers a crushing blow to the enemy, sending him flying. This blow is enough to completely disable an experienced mercenary. Having crashed into the wall, he falls down, trying to understand who this student is and why he has such skills. Misato observes the enemy, making sure that he no longer poses a threat, and decides to move on. Before leaving, he gives him a stern look that expresses complete moral superiority. He then turns to Asari and asks if she's okay and how she is feeling. After this, he tells the disciples who have risen to their feet that they need to leave here immediately. The students ask in surprise where he is going to go, since the exit is in the other direction. Instead of answering, he goes up to one of the doors and starts hitting it with his hands, leaving deep cracks. Having forced his way through, he calmly enters, looking around to avoid being ambushed. After making sure that it is relatively safe here, he tells his comrades that he has something important to do. Leia receives a message from colleagues reporting an emergency in the basement. She is informed that, apparently, her right hand has been defeated and the students have escaped and are at large. The informant also says that an incredibly strong guy has appeared there, defeating everyone. A few moments later, the connection with the informant is lost, and Leia looks at the phone in surprise, trying to understand what happened. The situation seems strange to her, because she doesn't understand what's going on at all. A few moments later, the doors open and Misato enters the office. Leia looks at him in surprise and asks who he is and why he came, but he interrupts her. He says menacingly that he is here for a simple reason, which he will now explain. Taking a few steps forward, he says that he has come to repay her for what she did 20 years ago. Leia says with surprise that she doesn't understand what kind of debt she could have to him from 20 years ago. Misato replies that she apparently doesn't understand anything, and adds that he will have to explain everything in detail. He says that 20 years ago, after appearing in the SSS-ranked dungeon, they began to be considered heroes. Leia tries to understand what this student is getting at, because at that time he wasn't even born yet. Misato explains that on that day, the evil intent of one man, who is now considered a villain by everyone, was revealed. Leia asks what he's talking about, hinting that she has no intention of listening to history lectures. Misato claims that Pentagram members now lead all major spheres of the world and are hailed as heroes who defeated evil. Leia asks what exactly is bothering him about this state of affairs. Misato says that this is a lie, and that they are actually the real villains. Leia is surprised to see his aura suddenly change, and asks what he means by such accusations. Misato says they sacrificed their own comrades to reap the benefits and build their legacy. He adds that even now they use the will of those who once stood beside them, and asks if this is not true. Leia chuckles when she hears him express such naive and fantastical thoughts and says it's funny. Afterwards, she asks if he really believes in such conspiracy theories. Misato confidently says that this is not a conspiracy theory, because he knows perfectly well what they did. Looking at her, he says that he himself saw how they pushed their comrades into the gate to seal it. Leia's eyes widen in horror, not understanding how anyone could have known what they had done. There is indeed something very strange about this situation, since the student cannot possibly know about these events. Misato looks at her sadly and asks if she still doesn't understand who he really is. Misato, striking a typical pose, tells her his real name and says he has come to get even with her. Leia instantly believes him, and realizes that in front of her is the same Misato whom they once betrayed. For a moment she doubts it, and says that it is simply impossible. But Misato counters that it is true. He reveals that he uses the very power that made him a monster and is reincarnated. Leia is momentarily stunned, trying to comprehend whether she will actually have to fight this man. Misato, meanwhile, says that she knows perfectly well what her company is doing in secret. He claims that if he makes this public, their reputation will be ruined, but Leia protests. Leia orders him not to disturb her, but he replies that she should be the one saying these words to them. He also says that she is to blame for what happened 20 years ago, and for trampling on Asari's hopes. With a menacing face, he again declares that he will never forgive her for this, and will definitely take revenge. Leia is unimpressed by his promises of eternal revenge, and says that in that case he has no choice. After that, she launches into a dramatic story about how her power cannot be underestimated, because he is no longer in Misato's body. She states that if he dares to appear before her and try to interfere with her plans, he will pay for it. She grabs the weapon and begins to swing it over her head to push back her opponent. After that, she delivers a lightning strike to the ground where Misato was standing just a few seconds ago. The shockwave from this attack spreads throughout the room, causing large cracks to spread across it. Misato, of course, manages to dodge in time, anticipating the move with the help of her incredible intelligence. Leia asks him what he thinks about it, and claims that the weapon's power was developed by his company. She adds that the weapon is forged from materials mined in the dungeons, which means it is stronger than any steel. After that, she jumps into the air and says that she will now demonstrate how sharp it is. She then unleashes a series of swift attacks, which Misato easily dodges. Misato simultaneously studies her fighting technique closely in order to copy it using abyssal magic. Leia perceives his passive fighting style as a weakness, and says that all he can do is dodge. However, despite this, she still can't hit it, even though she tries very hard. Misato tries to tease her by saying that she now understands why she moves so clumsily. Analyzing her combat style, he argues that she has become too caught up in her role as a corporate executive. He also accuses her of becoming complacent, and now being no better than Iwako, whom she once despised. These words immediately infuriate her, and she angrily declares that he will regret this. Having charged her body with thunderous energy, she prepares to complete the lightning throw. At first glance, it appears that it hits Misato, as he is sent flying to the side after being struck by the spear. Leia is pleased that she finally manages to hit him with a powerful attack. However, it turns out that Misato can somehow ignore any damage to her body. Leia watches him teleport from side to side and wonders how he dares to behave like this. She wonders if magic really works this way and decides to do things differently. Taking the energy of fire, she says that she must now finish him off with the next blow. With these words, she spins the spear above her head, creating a veritable ring of fire. She screams that now she will make sure that his mouth finally shuts up. After this, she lunges forward and makes a sweeping lunge, causing even the air to become hot. Misato makes no attempt to dodge the blow and simply looks at her. The whole point is that he reads her movements flawlessly and catches the weapon with just 2 fingers. Leia looks at this in surprise and says that this simply cannot be, because no one is capable of intercepting the weapon. Misato haughtily states that this is apparently the extent of her power, if she has nothing else to show for it. He accuses her of having actually become much weaker than she was 20 years ago, and that her fighting skills have deteriorated. Leia understands that when it comes to the extreme, she has no choice but to use her trump card. She runs away from Misato and quickly heads to her desk, where something very important is located. Misato watches her in surprise, and notices what she decides to take from the table. Leia gets to the syringe, which contains a test serum that can help deal with him. Without a second thought, she grabs the syringe and prepares to inject herself. Misato decides not to stop her, and Leia quickly injects herself with the full amount. Misato watches her with interest and realizes that her body is beginning to undergo a transformation. He asks if she is really willing to do this to win this fight. Looking at her, he realizes that she is turning into a real monster due to her exorbitant ambitions and desires. Leia says that now he will never be able to defeat her. Misato asks if she thinks it will be that easy to defeat him, even with these drugs. Leia reiterates that he shouldn't downplay her powers, as she spent a huge amount of time and money on the drug. She says that she collected materials that can only be found in the depths of the dungeons. She adds that ever since she witnessed his inhuman strength 20 years ago, she has been looking for a way to reach that level. She thanks him for inspiring her and says that she now has a power beyond anything she has ever experienced. Misato listens to her carefully and replies that it all sounds pathetic and naive. Leia looks at him with irritation, realizing that he still underestimates her and does not perceive her as a serious opponent. Misato asks how she dares to boast about such power, if it was only obtained through some drug. Leia asks him what he just said and declares that she will punish him for such insolence. Misato says that unfortunately, he will have to endure another monologue from her, as he is already tired of hearing the same words. Charging his fists with fiery energy, he says that it is time to put an end to this and put an end to their confrontation. Leia agrees with his point of view and claims that they finally need to find out which of them is stronger, once and for all. Jumping up, she charges and tells him that he must prepare for the greatest battle of his life. Misato dodges the blow, which instantly leaves a giant hole in the wall and pathetic debris. Misato looks closely at her opponent's destructive power and understands that now she will have to use all her strength. Leia asks him what he thinks about it, and adds that it is the result of her latest and most advanced research. Rushing towards him, she says that now she will send him to the next world again. Moments later, she strikes swiftly to put an end to his foolish dreams. Misato flies to the side and her body causes a powerful explosion upon impact with a hard surface. Leia begins to celebrate prematurely again, saying that she has won again and conquered her demons. However, after a few moments she stops, feeling incredible pain that begins to spread throughout her body. Looking down at her leg, she notices an icicle that has pierced it and is preventing her from moving. Misato proudly says that he implanted this ability the moment she launched her attack. Leia looks at him and asks how he managed to carry out such an operation so quickly. Misato explains that thanks to her subordinates, he understood how they use body enhancement magic to become stronger. He also says that her drug is a serious development, capable of impressing, but it only raises a whirlwind of destruction around it. Leia asks how dare he mock the results of her research, which she spent so much time on. Misato just smirks and says that this is just pathetic nonsense with which she justifies her atrocities. He lectures her, saying that she tramples on human life and calls it progress. He admits that she disgusts him, and Leia shudders at the confident, cold voice he uses. However, arrogance gets the better of her and she prepares to carry out a sneak attack. Rushing towards him, she declares that she will silence him and swings her claws. Misato deftly stops her punch and counters with a punch to the gut to incapacitate her. Leia feels unbearable pain and realizes that her power no longer works. She falls to the ground, trying to figure out what went wrong, while Misato already turns and leaves. Looking at him, she understands that this is the true strength of her former comrade, who is now winning. Misato walks away with her hands in her pockets, saying that none of that was ever real power. As he leaves the corporate building, he hears a familiar voice and turns towards Asari. Smiling, he says that he is happy for her, because now she is completely fine, and Asari reciprocates his feelings. A multitude of correspondents immediately come running to them, claiming that everything happened exactly as it was in the leaked information. Asari looks at him and asks if he was the one who called the news agency and told them about what happened. Looking at this, he reflects that the truth about Leia's crimes will now be revealed, which means all the test subjects will be safe. Asari interrupts his thoughts, saying that she would like to tell him something important. She admits that she doesn't fully understand what's happening, but she knows that without him she would certainly have died. Coming closer, she says that she wants to express her sincere gratitude to him. Misato notes that Asari thanks him for helping him in his time of need, and this proves difficult for him. He smiles and reflects that he almost forgot what guided him all his life. Looking at Asari, he realizes that helping others has always given him strength and meaning in life. The next day, the news announcer reports that illegal experiments on people are being conducted in an underground laboratory. It is also reported that this became known after an unknown person attacked Leia. According to doctors, Leia herself has memory problems, so the identity of the attacker remains unknown. Misato wonders how the others will react when they find out about this, when suddenly the broadcast is cut off. The news announces that Nathaniel, the leader of the Pentagram organization, will speak to the public. Misato becomes furious upon hearing this name and decides to listen to what he has to say. Nathaniel states that he is speaking to the people on behalf of his organization to convey an urgent message. He adds that they are deeply shocked by the incident that happened to Leia. He says that her comrades feel deep shame for not noticing her descent into darkness. Misato is surprised that the villains do not confess to their crimes, but try to deceive the public. Clutching the TV remote, he realizes that everything is repeating itself, just like 20 years ago. To his amazement, he realizes that these people have not changed at all and continue to lie. Misato assumes that people like Asari and himself are nothing more than nothings to be disregarded. Looking at Nathaniel, he plunges into memories, trying to remember what he said to him then. He comes to the conclusion that it was probably Nathaniel who led the expulsion in order to take power into his own hands. He understands that this is very likely, because he was always calculating and cautious. He realizes that Nathaniel's current location is unknown, but this does not change his determination to find him. Looking at his phone, he realizes that he has several ways to reach his goal. After some time, the action moves to a large temple, where one of the nuns is kneeling and praying. An unknown child approaches her, addresses her by name, Claudia, and delivers a message. Claudia listens carefully to the message, wonders if this is really true, and then continues to pray. Turning to God, she asks him to show her the way to a future that will be filled with light and abundance. After some time, a messenger comes to the gym to see another representative of the pentagram named Lord Ingolf. He is informed that the meeting is about to start, and he states that he will be there in a second. He mentally curses Leia for her carelessness, and wonders what she was thinking when she acted this way. After some time, all the remaining participants come to the meeting, where Nathaniel is already waiting for them. Smiling, he says that he is glad to see all the remaining members of the pentagram of saints in the ranks. Looking at each of them, he notes that it is time to start a council of leaders to coordinate actions and plans. After some time, the meeting ends and he declares that the case can be considered closed. Claudia questions who exactly exposed Leia's illegal experiments, adding that she finds it disgusting. Ingolf is surprised to see that the damned woman was doing complete nonsense, trying to disgrace the honor of their organization. Nathaniel agrees with the arguments of his interlocutors, noting that Leia really did commit an unforgivable act. Sitting down in a chair, he says that the experiments were carried out alone on her own initiative. He also adds that the rest of the organization had absolutely no idea about the matter. Iwako reflects on how Nathaniel remains true to his traditions and acts rationally, trying to shift all the blame onto her. He doesn't know how informed Claudia and Ingolf were, but he's sure that Nathaniel knew everything perfectly well. Iwako is surprised that he was able to abandon her so easily, despite the fact that they were involved in a terrible conspiracy together. However, he quickly switches to the thought that now it is much more important to follow Misato's instructions. Claudia says she's curious about the attacker, after which Iwako decides to speak out on the matter. He says that a sealed letter arrived at the academy from the one who attacked Leia. Claudia is very surprised by this, and Nathaniel immediately orders Iwako to read the contents of the letter. Iwako agrees and says that she will read the letter right now, since this is her first time doing so. He says that the attacker returned to the present world from the depths of the gates in which they imprisoned him. The letter also says that he is going to deal with everyone who did this to him and will be cruel. After that, Misato's name is on the letter, and as soon as Iwako says it, everyone starts acting nervous. Claudia is frightened and wonders if someone is using his name to harm them. Nathaniel claims that no one could know about the depths of those gates unless they had been there themselves. Therefore, it really was him. Claudia suggests that the time mage simply used his magic to transport himself. Ingolf says there is nothing to worry about, because if Misato really has returned, he can be eliminated again. Nathaniel agrees with his words, noting that there is no need to act right now. He also says that it doesn't hurt to be a little passive to observe the enemy's actions. After the meeting ends, Ingolf decides to spend some time alone with his thoughts. Looking at the starry sky, he remembers Misato, and a distinct note of anger appears in his voice. He says that this man is the only one he can never forgive for what he did. Meanwhile, Iwako passes on all the information received at the meeting to her new boss. Misato reflects on how Nathaniel doesn't plan to act immediately, and is being extremely cautious. From his point of view, this is good, because when they realize that he has returned, they will no longer be able to remain inactive. He decides to first strike at those whose location he already knows. He turns to Iwako and says that now they must act. He asks where to begin. Misato replies that the plan of action is quite simple and asks to arrange the move. He also states that he wants to transfer to an academy associated with Ingolf, as this is the easiest goal. Iwako explains that this man is not like him or Leia, as he has no dark deeds. Misato says it doesn't matter since he needs to at least see his face before fighting. He informs his subordinate that he leaves all formalities to him, after which he ends the conversation. Stepping out onto the balcony at night, he reflects that the absence of rumors about him does not mean anything. For Misato, the most important thing remains the fact that Ingolf betrayed him 20 years ago for an unknown reason. After some time, he boards a plane and successfully flies to another country to continue his studies. Asari watches the plane from the academy window, hoping for great success. She sees the plane off with a smile, despite the fact that the main character will never be able to see her. After some time, the plane lands in another country, located tens of thousands of kilometers away. Stepping out onto the streets of his new country, he wonders if this is really what Germany looks like. He reflects on the fact that he has already succeeded in establishing a connection between the academy of this country and Ingolf. He decides to use the academy to get closer to his next goal. The first thing he does is head there to get his bearings and understand the local routine. However, his thoughts are interrupted by the loud screams of a woman who declares that she is fed up with everything. Turning around, he notices a girl approaching a group of men, acting as if they were drunk. Taking a closer look, he realizes that it is a Japanese woman who has found herself in an unpleasant situation with foreigners. After thinking for a moment, he realizes that the people around him probably speak a different language. He decides to use magic to instantly learn the language and understand their speech. Gradually, the words spoken by foreigners begin to form meaningful sentences. The foreigners ask the girl why she doesn't chat with them a little, promising that they won't offend her. The girl replies that she is tired of them and refuses to deal with such rude people. The tipsy people ask her why she insults them and say that they will punish her for such words. As soon as they put their hand on the key, it becomes clear that this situation cannot be resolved so easily. But Misato abruptly intervenes. He asks in a loud voice why they decided to pester a girl who clearly doesn't want to communicate with them. A drunken tramp asks a strange schoolboy what the hell he is doing here and why he cares about their relationship. Misato sternly walks towards them and repeats that she demands that they leave the girl alone. He also calls them pathetic scum, which immediately makes them angry. One of them squeezes the bottle to the point that it explodes in midair and charges his fists with fire. Rushing to the attack and hoping to settle the matter with their fists, they order him not to underestimate them. Having reached the main character, one of them swings to strike. Misato simply thrusts her hand forward, creating a powerful stream of wind that throws opponents aside. They develop such speed that they fly past the girl almost instantly. Turning around, she is surprised that he was able to take out two thugs with one blow without receiving a single scratch. She notes this fact and understands that there is clearly someone unusual in front of her. Looking at the student, she mentally wonders who he is and why he is so strong. The hooligans meanwhile quickly get to their feet and run away, saying that they are very sorry. The girl approaches Misato and says that she is very grateful to him for helping her out. Misato replies that his actions require no thanks and notes that their fight has attracted attention. After this, he turns around and leaves so as not to attract unnecessary glances, since he does not want to stand out. The girl smiles and reflects that the last time she was saved like this was when she met a certain person. She decides to follow him to strike up a conversation and get to know him a little. Misato notices her following him and turns towards her in surprise, trying to figure out what she wants. The girl smiles and says that she wanted to thank him again, because if it weren't for him, everything would have ended badly. Misato smiles and suggests that she is a very sensitive person, adding that she is not asking for thanks. After taking a closer look, he realizes that the girl looks like he's seen her somewhere before. He continues to look at her for a while, but nothing comes to mind. Suddenly, the girl decides to start a conversation and asks if he is a Japanese student. Misato says she's arriving today on a short-term exchange program and is heading to the training academy. The girl replies that in that case, she will take him there as a token of gratitude for his help. Misato smiles and says that he would be very grateful to her, since he doesn't know the area well yet. He asks what she is doing here, and the girl replies that she is traveling the world. She also emphasizes that she is not doing this entirely voluntarily, but circumstances force her to do so. Misato looks at her carefully and realizes that it is rare to meet a girl traveling alone. He asks if she feels any danger, as such troubles can happen quite often. The girl brushes it off and says that she is fine, despite her appearance, because she understands spells. After that, she changes the subject and asks if he really plans to study at the training academy. She warns him that the school is known for its meritocratic system, and that many students think the same way. She explains that they have a class ranking system and their own hierarchy. Misato listens carefully and comes to the conclusion that these people take meritocracy much more seriously than in Japan. Remembering the information that Iwako gave him, he comes to the conclusion that regular training is conducted in Ingolf. He assumes that if he wants to get closer to them, he must make himself known at this school. This is ideal because the hero is incredibly strong and will be able to quickly climb the ladder of the strongest. After a while, the girl interrupts his thoughts and points to the school where he will study. The school is designed in a medieval style, and Misato takes a moment to admire its beauty. After this, he says that he will find the way himself and thanks her for seeing him off. The girl stops him briefly and says that she did not give her name, adding that her name is Shirato Sayuki. Misato shakes her hand and tells her the name of the previous owner of this body, Asai Kyosuke. Yuki suddenly becomes very surprised, as if she had seen a ghost, and looks at him for a long time without saying a word. After a while, she repeats his name, and Misato asks why she is acting so strange. Yuki immediately changes the subject, saying that his name is similar to the name of an acquaintance she hasn't seen for a long time. After that, she turns around and wishes him luck at the academy, and Misato watches her go and waves. He reflects on the fact that this girl is very strange, and something about her clearly sticks in his memory. However, time passes, and he decides that it is time to move on to make a name for himself at the academy. At first, nothing foreshadows trouble, and he calmly walks through a large park, where he meets ordinary students. Suddenly, a shadow looms over him and someone speaks loudly to get his attention. Misato looks up and sees a tall student standing in front of her, asking if he is a new student. Misato asks who is in front of him, calling him a young hooligan, but the boy begins to protest. After this, he suddenly makes a dash towards him and says that it is not every day that Japanese people are transferred to them. Coming closer, he states that he must make sure that the newcomer does not get the wrong impression of this place. Misato realizes where this conversation is heading and sighs, feeling like he doesn't want to start the day with a fight. However, he almost immediately remembers Yuki's words, warning him that this school professes meritocracy. Putting his bag on the floor, he says that he accepts the challenge and is ready to fight if his opponent so wishes. His opponent takes a few steps to the side and says that he is glad that he was understood at a glance. After this, he calls upon some magic and invites his opponent to begin the fight. This turns out to be a deception, as immediately after this he throws several fast-flying stones in his direction. Misato can handle this attack without much trouble, as some measly students can't harm him. These stones crash into the ground with impressive force and speed, only miraculously missing the one who originally created them. The red-haired student looks at his spell in surprise and wonders how it was dispelled so easily. Misato states that the number of stones was impressive, but their power was too weak. Immediately after this, he decides to create a more impressive earth spell, saying that this is how it should be used. After this, he steps forward to deliver a devastating attack. The giant ball flies by with such speed that it knocks the unfortunate student off his feet. Misato says that next time he should at least achieve a result that would make it look impressive. The unfortunate students wonder who this guy is and how he was able to achieve such skills even before joining the academy. Looking at him, they understand that it is better not to mess with him, because any battle with him guarantees defeat. Meanwhile, Yuki walks down the street and contacts her boss, who is Lady Claudia. Looking at the piece of paper with her goal, she reports that she has finally made contact with Asai. After this, she says that she will remain in Germany and continue to monitor the target until further orders. Meanwhile, we return back to the training academy, where Misato is infiltrating. He receives his new student card, which will allow him to move freely around the area. He reflects with relief that all the paperwork is finally completed, and now he needs to head to the local dungeon. He also puts the auto-translation on his student ID card to make it easier to read the information written on it. Taking a closer look, he realizes that he has exactly 0 points, and remembers the system mentioned earlier. However, he is not worried about this now, since he has no classes today, and he can test his strength. He calmly heads towards the portal that leads to the dungeon, unaware that he is being watched. The same student who had previously challenged him decides to keep a close eye on his supposedly new target. Misato muses that if he wants to get closer to Ingolf, he needs to upgrade his rank to special class. The first thing he decides to do is start earning points here, since this dungeon is one of the highest level ones. Looking around, he sees ruins that seem uninhabited, but this is just an illusion. He takes a few steps forward towards the monsters to find out who lives here and how dangerous they are. Analyzing the undead that live here, he realizes that he had never seen anything like this when he was in Japan. However, he somehow already knows all their vulnerabilities, because in his past life he possessed the relevant knowledge and talent. One of the skeletons, distinguished by its heavy weapons, makes a surprisingly fast movement for its armor. Misato is much faster and calmly steps aside to avoid the blow of the massive axe. He muses that the undead usually crumble under the force of impact and fire, so the choice of tactics here is obvious. Charging his fists with the maximum amount of firepower and strengthening his muscles with body magic, he crushes his enemies. No opponent can withstand even a single blow, as these skeletons are not designed to fight a true master. The undead watching the fight look at their opponent in surprise, realizing that he is too strong. Misato calls the remaining enemies and advises them to attack as quickly as possible. After some time, he calmly deals with everyone who stands in his way and begins to explore the dungeon. He remembers that all dungeons follow a certain logic, which means there must be a boss somewhere nearby. After a while, a giant magical skeleton appears before his eyes, which looks like a dungeon boss. Having sensed its aura, he understands that this monster is significantly stronger than the others, which means the fight will not be easy. To begin with, he decides to scout out the situation, assuming that there may be traps here that need to be disarmed. Taking proper aim, he releases a large fireball towards the enemy, which is capable of causing decent damage. As the fireball approaches, the skeleton begins to charge a wondrous spell into his staff. After a few moments, he effortlessly reflects the fireball and disperses it into the air. Misato is surprised by the boss's abilities, realizing that this is natural because he is not an ordinary skeleton. Immediately after this, the skeleton necromancer decides to take revenge on his enemy for disturbing his peace. Taking aim, he fires a projectile of corrosive magic, which, however, misses its target. Misato watches the magic in action with interest, realizing that he hasn't seen anything like this for a long time. Analyzing the behavior of this substance, he realizes that the ball melts everything it touches. He quickly realizes that this is a very high-level spell, but he thinks that it is even better for him. Thanks to his abilities, he can turn any spell to his advantage if he uses a little imagination. To begin with, he concentrates wind magic on his legs to increase his speed several times. After this, he begins to move around the enemy, dodging every shot and literally walking on air. At this rate, he finds himself within striking distance of his opponent in just a few seconds. Quickly copying his opponent's spell, he wonders if he can withstand his own volley. The skeleton doesn't have time to dodge and receives a charge of corrosive erosive magic right in the face. His fragile skull cannot withstand damage, even though it has been enchanted with magic. Misato jumps aside as the skeleton begins to shake in its death throes. After this, his aura slowly dissipates, and his body turns into magical dust. Misato muses that the effect of the copied spell was significant, even though he hadn't had time to fully study it. He understands that now he needs to increase the level of his void magic to make everything even easier. Immediately after this, he turns to his former adversary, who had been watching him the whole time. He orders him to come out of the shadows, and he grins and says that he didn't expect to be noticed so quickly. After this, he adds that he watched his fight and hopes that he will not object to further actions. Misato asks him if he really wants to challenge him to a duel again, realizing that he wasn't convincing enough last time. Looking at his opponent, he understands that he is probably hiding something, because no one would approach him so openly. Meanwhile, the young man says that this issue can be settled once and for all, and for some reason reaches into his pocket. Misato prepares to counterattack, realizing that his opponent is clearly up to something. However, to his surprise, the young man simply runs up to him and begins to beg him to accept him as a student. Misato looks at him in surprise and wonders what he even means. He notices the strange cup in the young man's hands and asks why it might be needed for such requests. The young man explains that it is a Japanese dojo bowl, and that he has heard that the Japanese pass such bowls around as a sign of respect. He adds that he cannot do otherwise, as he is drawn to Misato's strength and would like to become his student. The young man also admits that the fight was crazy, and he feels like an idiot for challenging him in such a situation. Misato realizes that everything would be easier if this boy would simply challenge him and once again prove his superiority. After this, he puts his hand on his shoulder, and the boy assumes that with this gesture he has been accepted as a student. However, a few moments later, an earthquake and a powerful explosion are heard, signaling the approach of the monster. A giant monster begins to tower before them, looking extremely threatening. The boy, confused, asks what's going on, and Misato points out that it wasn't the final boss. Looking at the monster towering over them, he realizes that the true master of the dungeon has finally appeared. The creature brings back some very unpleasant memories for the student, and Misato asks him what happened. The young man replies that he saw this creature in textbooks, and that it is the skull of a dragon that once wiped an entire village off the face of the earth. He also says that there were legends that Ingolf only miraculously defeated him, but somehow the monster ended up here. Misato turns around and says that everything is clear now, but his determination does not weaken at all. The surprised student asks if he is really going to fight this monster, as it would be reckless. Misato advises him to calm down and says that the knowledge he gained from books turned out to be fundamentally wrong. He adds that Ingolf was not actually the one who defeated this dragon long ago. He reflects that in the eyes of the Holy Pentagram, it was awkward to admit that he was the true winner. He smirks, thinking that history was rewritten for posterity like true cowards. Looking at the creature, he decides that he will simply defeat it again, as he did in the distant past. Preparing for the attack, Misato tells her comrade that it is time to engage in battle. The monster lunges forward and begins to trample the ground with its paws, creating shockwaves. The student clearly didn't expect such a reception from the seemingly mindless monster. But Misato comes to the rescue in time. He throws the young man aside and begins to dodge the continuous attacks flying in his direction. Misato reflects that the monster has become significantly stronger than it was 20 years ago. However, he believes that the fight will not be too intense, since he now possesses the attribute of emptiness. He rightly points out that it doesn't matter, as his invincible power cannot be surpassed. Having reached the required striking distance, he orders the monster to retire. He then uses a powerful attack to crush the giant's skull, instantly stopping it. The monster's head explodes and shatters into small pieces. The young man enthusiastically supports his mentor, claiming that he is the best of them all. Misato tells him that they should hold off on celebrating, as it's far from over. Unfortunately, the monster turns out to be capable of regeneration, even despite the destruction of its head. Misato notes that the dragon skull's durability is extremely high, so a different tactic is required. He realizes that the monster is tougher than expected, and decides to change his approach to the battle. Meanwhile, his protege is wondering how this man is going to defeat such a powerful enemy. At this time, the dragon skull makes a loud roar, trying to intimidate its opponents, not realizing who it is fighting. He then bends his tail to perform a quick sweep attack, but the heroes manage to dodge it. Misato realizes that he has become a priority target, as the monster is aiming to hit him specifically. Thanks to his incredible speed, he skillfully dodges the blow and decides to carry out a countermaneuver. The young man reflects that the monster has adapted, and has now switched to a tactic of constant defense. Misato realizes that he hasn't yet achieved the necessary concentration, because the mental image of the spell should be clearer. He recalls that the essence of magic lies in the clarity of the image, because the more precise the image, the more powerful the spell. The dragon skull launches another desperate attack, hoping to tear Misato apart with its teeth. However, this all turns out to be a trick. The monster suddenly stops and releases a stream of energy breath in his direction. The young man tries to save his mentor and rushes forward, hoping that he is not too late. A moment later, he freezes in horror and surprise. The thing is, Misato somehow stops this attack and holds the skull with her hands. Realizing that there will be no better moment to strike, he decides to use all his elements at once. He ironically remarks that he expected more from his opponent and tries to deliver the decisive blow. He then summons water magic to envelop the enemy, rendering them unable to move. When the process is complete, the water turns into pure ice, trapping the enemy in an icy prison forever. Misato looks calmly at the result of his work, and understands that this time he really tried. His new student watches the scene with awe, realizing that he did not expect such strength and cunning from this man. Looking at Misato, he comes to the conclusion that this person is too strong to be ignored. After this, he continues to follow him even after leaving the dungeon and calls him his master. Misato asks why he suddenly started addressing him so politely, and the young man replies that he now sincerely respects him. Misato, meanwhile, looks at her student ID card and says she hopes to get points. After this, he turns to his new comrade named Mateo and asks how much points affect class. Mateo says it's a rough estimate, but every 10,000 points will move a student up one grade. Mateo also notes that dungeon points are awarded at a fixed rate, so don't expect any special bonuses. Misato looks at her pass and realizes that she only received 500 points for visiting the dungeon, which is quite low. After thinking for a while, he comes to the conclusion that it will take him a long time to get into the special class. Mateo smiles and says that there is actually a more efficient way to quickly accumulate points. Misato comes suspiciously close to him and encourages him to tell him everything he knows. Mateo announces that in a month there will be a festival of heavenly grace, which is a small tournament. He emphasizes that this is an event where students compete against each other in assigned challenges. Smiling, he adds that the winner of the challenge receives an impressive 20,000 points. Misato thinks that this is a pretty big prize, so she decides to participate in the tournament no matter what. Clenching his fists, he feels an incredible determination to pump up and win without effort. He says that he will take first place in this so-called Heavenly Grace Festival. A month later, the start of the holiday is announced, and the host announces that it is time to begin the test. Mateo happily tells his master that it has finally happened. Misato, who has never worn the local uniform, understands that he needs to earn as many points as possible. He realizes that in this case, he will be one step closer to the one who betrayed him 20 years ago. The presenter explains that their mission is simple: they must take possession of the gem at the top of the tower. He also emphasizes that the method of achieving the goal does not matter. Participants can make their way in any way. He encourages students to show up at full capacity to see the full power they have developed. Misato finds that he likes this approach because he is a proponent of hands-on learning. Mateo turns to his master and says that he will try his best to make sure they take first place. Misato reflects that he was initially confused when he learned that teams only consisted of 2 people. He was lucky to have the perfect partner by his side, ready to follow his orders without question. After a while, he sees a familiar face. Yuki comes up to him and says hello. Misato asks Yuki what she is doing here, and she replies that she decided to check on him and see the results. Mateo asks if she is his girlfriend, to which Misato replies that there is no point in talking nonsense in front of a lady. Their dialogue is interrupted by the loud voices of the students, who notice an important person among the ranks of the jury. Misato decides to take a closer look at the screen and notices Ingolf there. He rises from his seat and watches the other students with interest. Misato barely maintains her composure and barely restrains herself from rushing into attack. The host welcomes Lord Ingolf and says that he is glad to see him at the school festival. Ingolf replies that there is no need to worry about this, since he himself is interested in seeing how the students perform. He adds that he is confident that among these students, there are those who truly deserve recognition. After a few minutes, the presenter announces to all students that they should head to the tower to take the test. Misato carefully looks around the area to get the best possible assessment of the situation. The tower looks impressive, and he understands that it will take a lot of effort to reach the top. Mateo also gets ready and firmly tells his master that it is time for them to move forward. However, soon a powerful explosion is heard in front of them, signaling the appearance of another obstacle. A giant wolf appears on their way, looking menacing and a hybrid of different monsters. Misato states that this is not surprising, since it was said that pre-created creatures would be released. Mateo wants to ask the master about the plan of action, but suddenly notices that he is not around. Misato is already rushing to attack, trying to defeat the monster with one blow in front of everyone. The other students watch in amazement at the result. The student destroys the monster with impressive speed. Misato turns to her comrade and asks why he is so slow, then suggests they move on. Mateo smiles and says that he will be happy to follow his master to the very end. Their impressive results appear almost immediately on the main observation screen, and everyone follows them with interest. Ingolf looks at Misato with curiosity, surprised that he didn't expect to see a Japanese person here. The students watching him comment on how the boy is acting unusually for his age, and Yuki is also surprised. Meanwhile, Mateo decides to demonstrate his strength and uses magic to crush another monster. Misato asks his friend if he's feeling okay, and Mateo replies that he's full of energy. Misato says he's glad to hear that, because they need to keep moving forward without slowing down. Mateo tries to hide the fact that he is very tired after fighting several creatures while following the master. Misato suddenly stops, sensing that something is wrong, and decides to hold off on moving forward for a bit. His intuition turns out to be correct. A few moments later, a powerful stone projectile crashes next to them. This projectile turns out to be so large that it collapses part of the stairs. Students at a higher level declare that they will not allow rivals to appear among them. Mateo tries to reproach them for such behavior, but they only smirk and say that they cannot hear him from this height. After this, they go ahead, saying that they will stay to watch their progress. Mateo turns to Misato and wonders what they should do now. Misato looks at the student and says that there are no questions here, since they will simply fly there. Mateo asks how they can fly, not suspecting that he will find out the answer in a few seconds. Misato grabs her comrade, then creates a stream of wind and rushes forward, ignoring his screams. After some time, two students appear at the gate and say that they have finally reached the last room. They talk among themselves, noting that everything turned out to be much simpler than they thought. However, they don't get to enjoy their victory for long, as Misato is already catching up to them. He states that he is forced to disappoint them, because their obstacles did not create any difficulties for him. Mateo also confidently says that they will not lose to some clowns who decide to play unfairly. These students respond that they shouldn't think too highly of themselves, because after this marathon, they can hardly stand on their feet. Misato notices that his opponents are moving too slowly and decides to go on the attack. The opponents don't have time to react in time, and he quickly strikes them on the back of the head. They only have time to wonder what happened, after which they immediately lose consciousness and fall down. Mateo is amazed at how quickly a person can be hit before they even blink. He also realizes that he didn't even have time to notice Misato's movement, realizing that a real god stands before him. Misato calmly opens the door and walks inside to collect her prize. Despite his doubts, he guesses that this is probably the gem he needs to get his hands on. Mateo happily says that they have hit the jackpot and can now enjoy their well-deserved reward. Misato stops him from celebrating too early, saying that this is probably not the end, and there is a trap here. Mateo wonders what he means when suddenly the floor begins to glow with strange energy rings. From these rings emerge living armor, which are formidable opponents. The presenter stands up in surprise and wonders what all this means, since this was not planned in the program. Ingolf does not order the test to be stopped, and a sly smile appears on his face. He wonders if the participants will be able to overcome this challenge, given its unplanned nature. Misato remains unperturbed despite the dire situation. Mateo feels a little scared, and Misato says that the armored soldiers are clearly not human. He assumes that someone created a spell that allows him to control so many warriors, and immediately guesses who it could be. He understands without a doubt that this is the work of Ingolf, who decided to eliminate him. One of the directors asks Ingolf if this magic belongs to him, to which he replies that it can be said that way. He adds that if it all ends too quickly, it would be boring to watch. The director notes that this is quite cruel, but Ingolf objects, saying that great magicians are only made through hardship. He doesn't think any single student can defeat that many opponents, but he's interested in seeing what they do. He says it's time to show what they can do, to showcase their skills. Mateo wonders what they should do, and Misato says that they can't take the gem without defeating the enemies. Mateo notes that it will be difficult because they have a whole army against them, and the opponents look very strong. Misato replies that he must do it anyway if he is going to achieve his goal. Mateo understands that there is no other way out, agrees with him and prepares for battle. He hopes that he can help at least a little with his actions. Unfortunately, his courage is short-lived, as this armor proves to be very strong. Misato, meanwhile, continues to fight without much trouble, as the opponents are still not strong enough. He decides to use body enhancement magic to stop the spear flying towards him with 2 fingers. Immediately after this, he prepares a powerful fire attack to break the enemy's spirit. No living armor has the slightest chance in battle against him, and this is noted by all observers. Students watching the action cannot believe that it is possible to deal with such opponents with bare hands. Misato performs highly skilled combat maneuvers, backed up by her masterful use of fire magic. With each passing moment, more and more enemies are defeated without a single chance of recovery. Mateo decides to hide in time and says that his master seems to have gone crazy, destroying everything in sight. Ingolf watches what is happening with satisfaction, and understands that this Japanese is capable of using serious magic. Believing that he wants to destroy everyone, he slams his fist on the table, realizing that it will not be easy. Immediately after this, knights begin to appear in even greater numbers than before. Mateo wonders what the school is up to by throwing such a dangerous test at them. Yuki reflects that with so many enemies, no one stands a chance, but she is interested in watching this fight. Looking at the protagonist, she mentally asks herself what his next move will be. Misato, meanwhile, forms the next spell she is going to use, turning back as she does so. Quickly counting the number of opponents, he realizes that there are about 30 animated suits of armor in front of him. He clearly understands that there are many of them, but compared to the monsters he has already encountered, this is nothing. This time, the opponents change tactics and try to use sharpened spears for long-range combat. Misato immediately creates a wall of rock to block any such attacks. Taking advantage of Misato's hesitation, the knights immediately try to surround him. Misato immediately notices this, and sends a wind slash towards them to get rid of the annoying enemies. He reflects that destroying these creatures one by one is pointless, and would prefer to erase them all at once. However, in the current situation, he does not have the opportunity to sit still and prepare a spell for a long time. He decides that the best solution is to use a spell he is already familiar with. This time he doesn't waste time recreating the formula, as he remembers it perfectly. Of course, he hates the person who first used this spell, but that doesn't matter now. Using void magic, he begins to concentrate his imagination in order to recreate that very spell. The ground around him trembles, and a large number of stone clots begin to emerge from it. Ingolf watches what is happening with extreme surprise, and cannot believe what he sees with his own eyes. Misato, meanwhile, is almost finished preparing for her grandiose ability. After this, he decides to use a combination of wind and earth magic to destroy his opponents. The living armor doesn't know what to do, and naturally becomes victims of this powerful magical attack. The explosion is so powerful that it even destroys several walls of the tower. After the smoke clears, only the pitiful remains of the armor that was destroyed remain on the ground. Misato emerges victorious in this battle, and calmly approaches the giant pearl, which grants him victory. Taking it in his hands, he says that the game is coming to an end, and he must receive his well-deserved reward. Mateo looks at his protege with joy, and says that he has finally done what he has wanted for so long. Rushing to him, he begins to support him in every possible way, saying that his master is the best. Yuki watches in surprise, realizing that she had never suspected that he was capable of using a combination of magic. However, he is not the first person she knows with such abilities, but it still impresses her. Ingolf also turns out to be pleased with the results of this battle, and even begins to laugh sincerely. He is impressed that a mere student can use a spell that Iwako spent 20 years developing. He looks closely at the student's face and decides to find out as much as possible about him. Turning around, he says that if this student gets into a special class, he will make sure to personally train him. After some time, the official award ceremony for the tournament results takes place. One of the hosts asks everyone to welcome the legendary Asai, who undoubtedly holds the upper hand in this tournament. Surprised students say that this man is amazing, because he transferred here only a month ago. They assume that it was madness, because this guy is clearly not an ordinary person and looks more like a deity. Meanwhile, the host says that the armband ceremony will now take place, and a special guest has been invited for this. Misato wonders who this guest might be and hopes it is not Ingolf. Unfortunately for him, the guest actually turns out to be Ingolf, who has decided to honor the academy with his presence. The presenter addresses Ingolf, calling him Lord, and then announces that the entire stage now belongs to him. The rest of the students look at what is happening in shock and cannot believe what they are seeing with their own eyes. Misato is also surprised that this man decides to come to the academy after everything that happened. His motives remain unclear because he cannot figure out what exactly this person needs. Ingolf approaches Misato and says that he is entertaining him quite well at the Heavenly Grace Festival. Misato tries not to reveal his true identity and says that it is a great honor for him. Immediately after this, Ingolf hands him the award armband, which Misato must tie himself. However, Ingolf leans towards him and invites him to his estate this evening for an important conversation. The students watch in amazement, trying to understand what it all means and why they are talking to each other. Immediately after this, Ingolf turns to the astonished audience and waves goodbye several times. He then leaves, leaving Misato lost in thought about what this man is trying to achieve. After some time, the action moves to the place where the main character was invited. The butler greets him politely and says that they have been waiting a long time for his arrival. Misato wonders in her mind what Ingolf wants to talk to him about, as now is not the best time for it. He assumes that he has been found out and understands that he needed more time to prepare the assassination. However, he soon reaches a large hall, in front of which loud, creaking doors open. Misato muses that if he acts incorrectly, this could escalate into a fight and enters the room. Ingolf greets him with a smile, glad that he has come, and invites him to sit down at the table. After this, he states that they will have a full conversation after the meal is over. Misato thanks him for his politeness, and sits down at the table, trying to figure out what the man is up to. Ingolf notes that Misato's exploits at the Festival of Heaven's Grace were more than impressive. Misato nods politely, after which Ingolf says that he has one question that he has long wanted to ask. Looking at him carefully, Ingolf asks what exactly Misato is hiding so carefully. Misato freezes for a moment, terrified, wondering if his plan and identity have been discovered in advance. He tries to pull himself together, clenching his fists, and understands that this simply cannot be. He needs to remain calm. He suggests that if Ingolf really knew who he was, he would have acted much more directly. Ingolf remembers the combination spell Misato uses on the top floor and praises it. He also asks why Misato is able to perform spells that took Iwako 20 years to master. Misato realizes he got away with it, and replies that Iwako conducted special training for him back in Japan. Ingolf chuckles slightly and says that it was probably then that Misato learned fusion magic. Misato says with a smile that Iwako was simply a good teacher to whom he owes everything. Ingolf smiles and remarks that this sounds completely unlike him, before praising Misato for mastering her power. He then places the cup on the table and says that such power is best not used for evil. Rising to his feet, he adds that otherwise he could end up the same way Misato once did. The protagonist is surprised, falls silent and tries to understand what exactly Ingolf wants to tell him. Ingolf gets up from the table and reminds everyone that everyone has probably heard about the SSS rank dungeon disaster 20 years ago. He adds that Misato became overwhelmed by his own power and eventually began plotting a twisted plan. Ingolf says that Misato had ulterior motives for bringing the monsters out of the dungeon, which he did not share with the team. He adds that this is how Misato planned to destroy the rest of the people, including his own allies, and conquer the world. Misato can't believe what he just heard, as it completely contradicts his true motives. Ingolf reasons that all this happens only in order to remain the only hero in this world. He also adds that, fortunately for them, they managed to stop it before this happens and thwart the coup attempt. Misato realizes that this is complete nonsense, and his fists clench in rage at what he heard. He realizes that these scoundrels are crossing the line, and he cannot ignore it, but now he is forced to restrain himself. Ingolf turns around and says that this is why he wants to warn him, so that he doesn't let the power consume him. Misato replies that she understands perfectly well that strength is only needed to fight evil. He firmly states that he is ready to do whatever it takes to become stronger than any person. Ingolf is impressed by such determination and falls silent for a while, looking at his interlocutor for a long time. After this, he says that Misato turns out to be as interesting a person as he imagined. He then comes closer to him and says that he will reward his fighting spirit and incredible efforts. With a smile on his face, he adds that in the next training cycle he will become his personal sparring partner to help hone his skills. Ingolf clarifies that this will only happen if Misato is not opposed to such a development. Misato gets up from the table and says that he understands everything perfectly, adding that it is a great honor for him. Looking at his opponent, he decisively says that he wants to fight him to test his strength. After a while, Misato becomes lost in thought, believing that this is the best reward he could ever ask for. Being among ordinary people, he thinks about how he will crush his enemy with everything he has and take revenge.